Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Paul Tilsley. I'm standing in for Councillor Grindrod, who has sent his apologies. I have to advise you to note this meeting will be webcast for live and subsequent broadcasts via the Council's meeting YouTube site, and that members of the press and public may record and take photographs except where there are confidential or exempt items. Have we had any apologies? Okay, thank you. And those been noted. Can I welcome, we're waiting for Councillor Shafiq Shah, but we've also got Councillor Sabrina Hussain and Councillor Miranda Fergus. And as I said, my name is Paul Tilsley, so I'm the Deputy Chair of the committee. So we've dealt with apologies, declarations of interest. Are there any? I'll make one, and that is in the minutes of the 30th of the 6th. It refers to me in my position as a non-executive director and representative of Birmingham Airport and chairman of the Audit Committee. I have stepped down as chairman of the Audit Committee, having done my 9 statutory years, 9 years of purgatory. So I have been released from that. But that is an ongoing declaration of interest, and I take it that there are no others. There are no, as far as I'm aware, exempt information items on the public agenda, and therefore we can move on to the minutes of the committee meetings that were held on the 26th of April. The 30th of May and the 30th of June. Are we content with those? I am. On that basis, I think I agree. And I think any issues that are outstanding will be covered in the agenda, which is fairly extensive, shall we say, this afternoon, which then takes us on to the Birmingham Council's complaints follow-up and a verbal update from the Chief Executive and Peter Bishop, who is the Director for Digital and Customer Service, and Paul Clark, Assistant Director of Programmes. So, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair. And so I'm here today really with hopefully with one outcome, which is giving this committee reassurance and assurance about the way in which we're using complaints and performance management information, performance information to drive improvement and create one organisational approach, but more importantly, to have a customer-focused approach to everything that we do. So, yes, please, if you could put the slides up, that would be great. Thank you. I've just got some slides to help guide the conversation. And I know that you've invited me here today following concerns from some of your committee members at previous meetings that they are still concerned about silo working in the organisation, and you want assurance from me that improvements are being made regarding how we join up our services and our response to services. And what I would say personally is this is really important. And I know it's really important because our residents do not live their lives and deal with problems and issues in neat, discrete boxes of service delivery. So I'm very mindful of that. And it is something that we talk, that I talk to CLT about, but we do more than just talk about it. I have got significant examples of the way in which we are changing the way in which we work. And I'm not going to tell you that we are joined up, fully joined up. There are examples, I think, of ways in which we are now approaching some of the challenges that our residents focus in a much more joined up way. But there is more work to be done. But I think we're on a journey where we're already seeing some benefits from working differently. So there are a couple of things that I want to talk about in a little bit of detail, because both I and the corporate leadership team have a clear intent and commitment to operate and behave as one organisation. More importantly, by doing that, deliver joined up services to our citizens. So there are a couple of things that we've done, and if you could move to the next slide, that'd be great. So we've developed a new corporate plan which has set out the priorities for the organisation, both in terms of what we want to achieve and how we will operate to do that. And hopefully you recall that we've presented the corporate plan on a number of occasions at different committees, and Paul in particular has been responsible and has done an heroic effort in pulling that corporate plan together for the organisation. We've also strengthened our performance management and reporting arrangements, and there's clear oversight and awareness of critical service delivery and improvement. And when I talk about critical service delivery, I'm talking about critical areas where we have failed to meet the performance standards that we've set ourselves. So it's really important that we understand that, and once we understand it, we can then put mitigation and changes in place to address it. We've also reorganised the way that the corporate leadership team are meeting, and we put more focus on joined up strategy development as well as performance management. So all the corporate strategies that we do, and I'll go on to talk a little bit about some of those in particular, but it's really important that when we start to develop strategy, we start from the right point, which is, this strategy includes all of us. And one of the principles that I'm working with the corporate leadership team with to establish is, one for all and all for one. That principle is if there is failure in any of our services, it's failure for all of us, not just one bit of the organisation. There is also a more corporate approach to complaints handling, and Peter can talk to you about some of that, because it's not just enough to collect information on complaints. We have to do the next step, which is use those complaints to do deep dives into why residents feel that they have to complain in the first place. And then to do the mitigation and say if there are a number of complaints in the specific service area over a period of time, that is telling us something about that service. And then starting to take a more citizen-focused and place-based approach to planning and delivering our services. So again, one of the things that we talk about all the time in CLT is, what does this mean for the resident? What does it mean for the citizen? And let's put ourselves in the shoes of those citizens. And let's actually talk to you as local councillors more, because you're the people that have that day-to-day engagement and contact with residents. So that's the kind of context of the work and the change that I and the corporate leadership team are doing, just around the philosophy and the way of working and our commitment to working as one organisation. So the new corporate plan, again, I will be surprised if any of the members on this committee are saying they haven't heard of the corporate plan or haven't been involved in a conversation about it today. But we have developed a new corporate plan. It brings together elements from other documents to provide a cohesive framework. And this is really important, because each directorate develop their own approach, or develop an approach to managing performance, to developing strategy. And we need an umbrella document. We need a North Star, a guiding star, a hymn sheet, whichever analogy you want to use. We need a document that brings all of those together and makes sense of them as well, and breaks down that silo. So this isn't just a corporate plan that talks about what city ops does or what housing does. It talks about the issues that our local people are experiencing, and then gives you a response to how we're going to respond to those. So each of the priorities set out in the plan are delivered through activity and delivery from several service directorates from across the council, supporting a much more joined up and one organisation approach. I'm unashamedly going to promote our ambition to be the best performing council in the country. I think we've got to have that ambition, and it's not unreasonable for you to expect that of us, and certainly for our residents to expect us to be the best performing council in the country. But we've got to modernise some of our delivery. We've got to improve some of our delivery, and we've got to deliver our priorities in the most effective, efficient and productive way. And we've got to operate, deliver as one organisation. I'm absolutely clear about that. We will not achieve that excellent performance status if we don't operate as one organisation. So we've called the document a corporate plan, not a council plan. And the reason for that is it is a plan of the organisation, not just as silo directorates. And I want to bake that corporateness into the document, and the framework that we've taken you through on a number of occasions demonstrates that. So the next area that I want to talk about is performance management arrangements, and the organisation has now created a performance management. I don't know, you're not a service framework, but we've also put resources. You know, Paul has been appointed as the assistant director managing performance management. The process of performance management arrangements, but we are all accountable for managing our performance and improving our performance. So there's a monthly CLT performance board that highlights service performance issues for collective awareness. So at the corporate leadership team, we look at the performance across all of the organisation. And again, this organisation approach to mitigation and performance issues. We're also able to provide support for improvement. So, as I mentioned before, if there's an area that's not performing as well as it should be, it's a problem for all of us, not just for that specific director or that directorate. So we meet, so I'll give you an example. So we had a meeting where we discussed missed bin collections. Now that's important that we're all aware of this, because it's one of those universal services that every single resident in this city experiences. I mean, you know, the importance of CLT being aware of the performance and the context and the challenges, you know, directly impacting on that performance is really, really important to us. And I know, you know, this is something that all of you on this committee and on the council are really, really aware of and sensitive to as well. So it's really important, therefore, that CLT all care about this as well. So it's not just, you know, we don't just wring our hands and say, oh, it's terrible. The performance on missed bins is terrible. Actually, you know, I won't let CLT out of the room until we've got a commitment and we've got a plan for improvement. And then we have quarterly performance meetings with each directorate as well, which Paul leads. It's led by the corporate performance team, but it improves corporate understanding about service performance. So we do it at a CLT level, and then there's that reinforcement at a directorate level as well. And that allows Paul and his team to collect the common themes and learning out of those directorate meetings that he can then feed across the whole organisation. And the importance of that is because we all need to understand the interdependencies. And I talk about this a lot. You know, a lot of the services we deliver are dependent on support and challenge from other bits of the organisation. So, you know, if you take these things again, you know, if you want to improve that, there needs to be a regulatory input, there needs to be a finance input, there needs to be a legal input. You know, so the conversations we have as well is it's not just about city ops. It is dependent and interdependent on other bits of the organisation to respond. And then, of course, there's that last ingredient in the mix, which is what does this mean for the residents and the citizen? And I'm very unashamed. I will continue to put the citizen at the heart of everything we do, because that's why we're here. So the process also involves joining up a range of data and information from across the organisation as well. So we have service key performance indicators, we have complaints data, we have ombudsman reports as well, and this is something that we are going to be much better at. You know, and if I say I've worked in 6 local authorities, and I have never had a public interest report, for example, in any of those other authorities. Yet we have them. We have had recently a number of public interest reports. So what is that saying to us as an organisation? You know, and I know that people have varied views and ideas about the Ombudsman and the Ombudsman reports, but I think they're really important and they're really serious. And when we have an Ombudsman report, we need to understand why it is we have not dealt with a citizen's or a resident's complaint adequately enough, which means they have then had to resort to the local government ombudsman. And you know, I personally take that really seriously, and now CLT are taking that seriously as well. And then there's the direct performance reporting to CLT and Cabinet, which is now aligned to corporate plan priorities. So again, we're making sense. We're joining up the dots. We're reinforcing all the reporting and the response to service challenges in a consistent framework, which Paul can talk to you about in detail if you want. And then, of course, all of that is reflected in the corporate performance and delivery plan that summarises key delivery milestones, which I would expect this committee to receive, and then the key performance indicators, which we use to demonstrate delivery and progress against the corporate plan priorities. So, as I said previously, this really is an attempt to bake in this one organisation approach to our service delivery. So if you can move on to the next slide, I just want to talk to you a little bit about how corporate leadership team is working differently. And you've got members of CLT here, again, if you want to talk to them about this. But we've got a fresh rhythm and purpose for the corporate leadership team meetings, with more emphasis on a joined-up approach to service planning, delivery and improvement. Meetings are themed and structured to support collective and corporate discussion, and it also allows peer review as well. So what I say to all the directors is, you know, we've all been appointed because we have certain expertise and experience, but actually we can always be better. So challenging each other, being curious about our service, and more importantly, providing solutions and support to improvement is really, really important. You know, and CLT members need to accept the challenge and the curiosity in the positive way in which it's been offered. So performance delivery and improvement, as I've mentioned before, there's now a monthly performance meeting which highlights service performance issues. It's not just about, you know, look how well we've done. It's, you know, we've got a serious problem here, so how are we collectively going to resolve it? We also look at assurance and risk. So we ensure that we look at ombudsman matters and internal audit concerns and governance compliance issues. And we do all of that at corporate level. So again, that is really important that CLT understand and have sight of all of these instead of them being reported in a particular way, and some CLT members never having sight at all about what could potentially be an internal audit support. And we've got an assurance framework and assurance body that meets as well, and the statutory officers meet once a month as well, more frequently if we have specific issues that we need to talk about. And then strategy development as well. And I think this is really important because I want everyone to make a contribution to the strategies that we're developing right at an early stage. You know, so there are proposed strategies around levelling up and housing strategy. Again, I want all of CLT to both understand that and contribute to it as well. And then there are strategic responses to challenges that need to be done at a corporate level. And a good example is the recent work we have done and continue to do on cost of living. That's a real challenge to the city and its residents. So corporately and collectively, what do we need to do to respond to that? And then if you could put the next slide. This is a corporate approach to customer complaints handling. And I will give you the strategic overview of this, but Peter can certainly talk to you about any of the granular detail. But what I would say is the way in which we manage complaints is just as important to me as it is to you, because let me tell you, the amount of complaints I get in my inbox is significant. And when I get a complaint, it's often because the the first line of defence has failed in terms of, it being sorted. So again, people feel that they have to elevate it up to me as chief exec. So the first question I ask is, why has this resident felt that they have no other option but to contact the chief exec?
Or member.
Or member.
Yeah.
So that's the first question I ask. And what I want to do is create a learning culture from complaints as well. So as I mentioned before, it's not enough to just see the volume of complaints. I want to understand what those complaints are telling us about the way in which exactly and what we're doing about it. So it's not just about the way in which we manage the complaints. It's about dealing with the root cause of the complaint, which is the fact that they're not receiving the service that they should, or they're not receiving the quality of the service that they could. So we now have one system for all complaints, as you know. That's member inquiries, comments and compliments as well. We've got an updated complaints policy. You know that we've got a dedicated complaints team embedded within each directorate that investigates challenges and supports improvement. And we've also got, and this is really important, I think, a robust quality assurance undertaken within services on the quality of responses. And this is really important because a lot of the reasons why people feel that they have to complain to me is not because the complaint has been responded to, it's how that response has been responded to. And sometimes it's a lot better than it was because Peter and Wendy and their team have been relentless in driving in better quality assurance in our responses. But really, some of the responses that came across my desk were just not acceptable. The lack of empathy, the lack of understanding, the tone, the dismissiveness, it just was not good enough. So they have changed. We've still got more work to do, but we're investing a lot of effort and energy in making sure the culture of the way in which we respond to those complaints is a lot better. But it does need more work. So I'm not standing here in front of you saying we've got a beautifully formed response. We haven't. But we are working hard to make that. But it is part of the cultural change that I'm introducing into the council as well, working across all, and each member of the corporate leadership team understands the need for that cultural shift, about putting residents at the heart of everything that we do. So I'm going to move now. I'm just conscious of the time. I'm going to move to slide 6 because I do want to give you the opportunity to ask us questions. So there are examples of some joined up service improvement, which should give you some reassurance and confidence that we are working differently, really. So there are examples of how we're using complaints data and performance information to improve the customer experience. So assisted bin collections, and I know, again, for many of you on this committee and on the council, receive complaints from your residents when we failed to assist residents in emptying their bins. But with support from the corporate complaints team, the service now has a better way to manage information on a dynamic basis to triangulate data from complaints, service requests and dropped work. Because what we were finding is that parts of the organisation were not as joined up as they meant to be. So we'd have complaints and the service would say, that's not right, we've been out, we've done that. And residents were saying, well, you can say that all you like, but we still haven't had our assisted bin sorted. So that is far more joined up. Again, more work to be done on that, but at least we've got the system in place and we've got the commitment across the organisation to make that work. Housing applications in September 2021, the housing applications team had a significant backlog of applications, which was nearly 15,000. And this was impacting our people's ability, our system's ability to join the housing register. Now, we've brought in, and I have to say this is in a large part to Peter and his team, but we've brought in interim support advisors, which were provided by the customer services team to assist in reducing the backlog of applications. Now, it's now operating at less than 6,000, but that is still unacceptably high. So we are continuing to work to drive that figure down. But it's also helped the service to determine resourcing of the service moving forward. So the backlog has continued to decrease, and the numbers of complaints therefore have also reduced as well. Now, in order to get the backlog down, this has a short, medium, and long term kind of program. So long term, we want to build more houses for people to get them off the homelessness list and to give them more options. We need to use what we've got more. We need to maybe buy private sector homes for rent. And then the short term is just managing the process better, which is what we're doing. And you can see to reduce the figure from 15,000 to 6,000 has been significant. And I would say, I'd just like to thank Peter and his team in specifically working with our housing colleagues as well to get that figure down. But I also accept that that is still not where it needs to be, and there's a lot more work to be done on that. We're also working differently in places as well. So again, member inquiries from ward councillors in Ladywood in particular prompted us to examine the complaints and inquiries data and identify the number and types of complaints coming from this area. Now, we've identified a small number of rows that are experiencing a combination of issues, and that combination is creating an environment that is not good for our residents. So waste, fly tipping, poor parking, HMOs, antisocial behaviour, it all begins to create a picture of a place that is not great and positive for our residents to live in. So we've got now a corporate approach to that. So we've got different parts of the organisation coming together to work together to resolve some of that. Now, it's not good enough to just say we resolve the poor parking issue and therefore it'll sort. We've got to have a concerted, joined up focus on that particular place to challenge all of those particular issues. The project's ongoing at the moment, but we're seeing significant changes, and we're also seeing a reduction in the kind of complaints that we're getting from that area as well. And what I say to CRT, this isn't rocket science. It is simply about us working differently and putting the resident at the heart of everything that we do. So I'm going to stop there, Chair. I've got more detail which I can talk to you about, but I thought you would probably want a little bit more time.
I think so. The report was quite comprehensive that Peter produced. Peter, Paul, comments, additions?
Yeah, as co-ord ONS report in 2019, it does go back that far, showed that it needs to be sorting this out. So obviously we had COVID wrong. But while it is embarrassing to continually have such high volumes of complaints across the council, and quite rightly illustrating that we're not always talking to each other as effectively as possible, to customers as effectively as possible, we're shining a light on it. There's nowhere to hide. It's talked about pretty much constantly across both at direct report levels and directors. My business support team act as the focal point in to every director about what the hell is going on, and why have you got so many, what are you doing about it, and where can we improve it? And it's a real absolute slog, but we've got to do it. So I think for me, we have to go through the pain, and we're a democratic organisation. We have to be transparent about it, face up to it. You can't fix it unless you know about it. That's where we were. Nobody should be happy about it before in that 29. We did not know what was going on in that kind of way that said, well, hang on, housing and city ops, why aren't you talking to each other about who returns the bin back to the location on flats or something like that?
We've had a lively discussion about that.
I am sure. And I know we constantly play it out, but and we're not only training and retraining and constantly learning about improving the individuals who respond, and we still get it as well. We're actually now putting together, and it's a sort of embarrassing to say, we're actually retraining everybody on basic customer service. And that's being done under the customer service programme, but it doesn't matter because we do have to reset everybody's perception about what is good. And unfortunately, it's quite common that people start to get into fixed behaviours, and then they need somebody else to shine a light and say, well, actually, this isn't good enough. Just look, what does it feel like to you? So how would you feel like if this was you? And so, it's still work in progress. We are seeing some improvements, but we're only as good almost as our last complaint. And if you think about your experience when you get pulled in as members, it's often at the most desperate moments, and we've failed. So we're slogging this through to get it sorted. And so absolutely, certainly from my commitment, my fellow colleagues' commitment, there's absolutely commitment to get it done. But it is going to take a while to turn some of these things around. Because as Deborah's highlighted, some of these things are big systemic issues, like we haven't got enough houses in the city. That doesn't mean to say we shouldn't manage their applications in a proper way, but we just don't have the housing supply to manage it. We've got a lot of our housing stock that could do with some significant financial investment to improve it, and therefore they have more breakdowns, and therefore they bring us up, and therefore they challenge the repairs team when they come, and do they come on time, and have they come, and all the things that play out. So but we can still raise the visibility. What can we do about? Well, what can we do, even if we can't necessarily fix 60,000 boilers or so? I think it's definitely a work in progress. I would never say to you that quotes it's fixed, because any complaint, any failure is not a good place to be. The key thing is, can you show that you've done something about it? And I think we can now, but I'm not sure it's all consistent or all happening in a smooth way. We will always get complaints, but we've got to just double down on this volume that we're getting by working with Rolling City Lots and Julie in housing, for example, and start joining the dots so that they can work more effectively together to get it done.
Thank you. I do want to leave some time for colleagues to make any comments or ask any questions, obviously. Colleagues?
Well, I'll go first. Thank you.
Go on.
Thank you, everyone. That was quite good. I did always struggle with the communication issues between the whole departments, and so I'm glad that we're all still having some sort of communication. And probably just saying for us, when we're out on the street talking to our residents, and we always have this issue of whose is who, this belongs to transport, that's housing, and unadopted land. It needs to be probably from us as well, be easy access. If we knew exactly whose is who, because sometimes we're trying to figure out whose is who, and we're knocking on all sorts of doors, and we can never figure out what it belongs. But to the main citizen who's actually raised that complaint, they don't care if that flight pin is on transport or housing or unadopted. They wouldn't go. But the loopholes that we have to jump through to get to it, that's another communication that we're failing on. So I'm not quite sure how we're supposed to use. Maybe Peter can find a solution to find out how to join these dots up together, make it easy access for us. And probably when something Deborah mentioned about Ladywood, about the HMOs and parking and flights and everything. It's not just Ladywood. No, it's probably every 60. Yeah, I know.
Just an example.
Yeah, but I was just thinking that's probably every 69 wards.
Yeah.
But it's just how do we make it even more, more livable? Because some of the people we've been talking to, because out with it, back in going on many moons ago when we lived here, it was like this and we had this, and everybody remembers keep pretty tidy, that slogan. I still remember it. We all used to keep our area tidy. The neighbours don't communicate with each other. Everybody fights, it's this, that. It's not the way it used to be. So how do we get the residents and everybody to communicate as well as they'll make our life a little bit easier, because then we're all talking to each other. So it comes back to communication.
Do you want me to respond to that? So what I would say, it shouldn't be for you to make sense of stuff and join up the dots. So that's our job, and you need to talk to us about that, and we will then take responsibility for making that happen. The other thing I would say about some of the challenges that we're seeing in some of our places, we've got the programme now of CLT visits where we are walking about in places so people can first-hand see the challenges that some of our residents have to respond to. And it's not right, again, it's not rocket science, and it's quite right that we kind of do that. I want to go out with neighbourhood policing teams. I want to kind of meet you as local councillors in your place. I want you to kind of help me understand what the big challenges are, or help us understand what the big challenges are, so we can then make sure the response is the right response.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you very much for that, because I think I entirely agree that actually what we really need is a joined up thinking and joined up approach, because that's what I was so frustrated by, I think, before, with seeing that actually sharing of information, sharing data, there are always going to be common causes, common links, and it makes sense to do that. So I'm fully on board with that approach. Just wondered whether there is, whilst the corporate team and obviously the directorate are meeting up and discussing, is there in place a direct routes of accountability within each directorate in terms of issues? So taking, for example, missed bin collections that we see, that it is this point about, is there a clear chain of command that says, okay, well, the head of the directorate is saying, well, hang on, I've had this report. We're able to identify potentially this, particular area is being consistently missed, and is it going back to as simple as actually the depot managers, whoever are being made aware? Because I think it's that part of the chain that we need to make sure is in place.
And I think that absolutely is. I mean, but what my team do is go, depot manager, we're getting loads of complaints, and what are you doing about it? So actually, and because that data is not just reported into that depot manager or the manager's manager, it actually goes right to Rob James, the Director of City Housing. There's no hiding from the fact that the volumes are there, the root causes are there, they're obvious, so nobody can, quote, hide it and then not have that sense of accountability. So, and I'm sure it frustrates directors, because I'm often going to them saying, well, actually, the data's telling me something very different. Actually, the citizens are telling us something very different from what we're hearing. So we're doing the triangulation. And actually that creates more pressure, is the wrong word, but it effectively is to sort it out so you don't get back to the first place. So I would say it is there, because it's not in this silo. It's actually two places coming together, integrating and bringing the data up so people can actually see it. And then, as often happens, Deborah will say, well, what are you doing about it? Because we're very transparent about it through the reporting and the frameworks that Paul was articulating.
And can I just in the spirit of, we are open and transparent. So we've got the service director here, Sue Harrison, and Sue, you might want to just very quickly just talk about how you deal with, complaints and service improvements through your department very quickly. But
yeah, we've developed a system for our directorate, starting from the corporate conversation and our performance through to my leadership team, where I expect that the discussion we have at my leadership team cascades down to my assistant directors' team meetings, because a big part of it for me is lessons learned, isn't it? It's not just making sure that we're responding to people in an empathetic way, and I've got to be at times a polite way, because I've also QA'd, coming in quite new, some of my own responses, and I've called them back and have them rewritten, because I've not been happy with the defensive nature of officers' responses. It's not been helpful. So the whole culture shift, I think, has to be, we admit it straight away, because life isn't perfect and everybody makes mistakes. But you tell somebody when you've made a mistake and you do your best to put it right. And our families, even if they have been let down, appreciate the honesty of saying, do you know what? We're really sorry, that shouldn't have happened. How can we put it right? We were in a situation where, for example, our ombudsman responses will go into different places in the council, so sometimes my officers weren't seeing them. That wasn't deliberate, but how can we learn from our mistakes when you don't have that cohesive system?
Yeah.
So now we do, they all come to me, and we have a monthly, what do we need to learn, discussion, and that's cascaded down as well. So we've got the system now that wasn't in place before. We still need to work hard on that culture, because for some officers it's more of a challenge than others to not be defensive and not to, you know, it wasn't me, but well, it doesn't really matter who it is, but if one of the team drops the ball, the whole team has to wrap around them and make sure that we're getting right what we got wrong.
And as a service director myself, to illustrate, I mean, I know I can talk about it from the whole council perspective, but my own area, we do exactly the same. Every month, where's your performance, and show me the service improvement. And I know in other areas do the same.
Okay, so for less, best for less.
He's looking at you. He's looking at
Everybody's stepping back.
No, no, thank you very much, Dr. Bishop. You'll know that I'm a fully paid up senior as far as this is concerned, purely from the point of view that we've put £1.2 million into the service improvement, which came as a result of a notice of motion that I moved, supported by the late Councillor Neil Eustace, because we saw that the system wasn't fit for purpose. As far as complaints were concerned, Peter, there was, as far as I was concerned, there was one single entry, and that was BCC council complaints. We now have 9 entry points. Now, with the best will in the world, you are asking councillors to be the arbiters of the bureaucracy. I would say it's your responsibility to be the arbiters of the bureaucracy. And if you've got a single entry point, you can still count the number of complaints that you get, but you are then farming them out to the appropriate department. And all I want is a simple solution to enable members to make a complaint on behalf of constituents. And I was told at the point where the presentation was made that this is a simple thing that you can walk around your ward and you can fill in the form on the hoover. And then there was the added, which brought it into total disrepute as far as I was concerned, because one box said political designation. Well, it don't matter who I am or what I am, I'm a councillor. So, you know, with the best will in the world, that was an unnecessary addition, which diluted the whole process as far as I was concerned. I had some problems because we were told at the inception of the new system that you will still be able to use your own contacts. And I do, because if I've got a sensitive case as far as adults are concerned, I'm going to go to an officer. I'm not going to put it into the general run. If I've got a housing issue that is confidential, I'm going to put it to an officer that is going to deal with it, not into the pool. But I've also found that officers, assistant directors that I've had a long-term relationship with, that I've thrown a complaint to, have then referred me to the corporate entry box. So that is a general comment. I have got a number of issues that, for example, on the end of July, I asked for a cleaning schedule of an area in Sheldon. Still ain't had it. 25th of the 7th. You mentioned housing. Housing is a very, very sensitive issue, obviously, because we've got excess demand and limited supply. But It's how we deal with people in the interim. And I had to step in at Easter where a flat was, because of repairs, it was uninhabitable. And it was a Friday evening. If I hadn't have had the Director of Housing's mobile number, they would have been total limbo. But it is get it right first time, which is going back to the whole of the premise, Chief Executive, that you started with, that we need to get it right first time, because we then cut out all the complaints. And I go back to the previous administration, where we had exactly the same problem with the housing department and repairs. And collectively, we set about it, or I set about it, with the cooperation of John Lyons. And we did get it right first time eventually. It took a lot of searching and heartache. But it was getting it right first time. So you hadn't got that continual bureaucratic churn. You ain't done the repairs, so they come back and we write another letter. We get another letter back and it's still not done. And it is, if we can get it right first time, we solve all the problems. Now, I know that officers do want to do the best, and I quote the comment that you made, Chief Executive, that we want to be the best performing council in the UK.
Okay.
And I started off in 2005 with a 1-star authority with CPA. We got to 3-star. And Michael Lyons, who was a predecessor of yours, said we'd never achieved more than 2-star. I made sure that he knew that we had achieved 3-star. But it is, we're working with you. We want to get it right as members because it's in our interests. Because it's a better service for our constituents. And you want to get it right because you can then start patting yourself on the back. And at the end of the day, it's the residents that count, not you.
Absolutely right. So we're here to serve. See, so I could make some points about the 9 entry points. We made some decisions about those entry points. And feedback from other ward members as well as yourself, Councillor Tilsley, there is always a trade-off between single entry points and others. And you and I have debated this before, particularly about the telephone lines. And, you know, if you have a single phone line to get the work distributed to the right teams, you have to create lots of decision trees. And every one of you will know what that feels like when you're waiting and you're pressing option 1, then you do option 4, and then you do option 5, and then you get to the right thing. So you've got all this trade-off. Clearly, we can improve the form. It was member feedback that in the previous incarnation of the member inquiry system, if you remember, it goes back to sort of 2018, 2019, where there was a lot of concern about other members seeing other members' work. And everyone getting very sensitive to that. So we've tried to be sensitive to that, but it's on the set. I don't know why we were so frustrated. But and we're now, I think I can't remember the exact date, but we're actually going to publish all the dashboards that you'll be able to see, all that data, all there, completely transparent. You can look at it and use it, and we're rolling that out on a careful basis. We talked to Councillor Jones very carefully, said, look, let's just not rush it all out. But we've got the data, we can publish it, we've got the dashboards that really help you. I would never, ever say that you cannot talk to an officer. Never say that. All I would say is that you need your problem fixed. End of. Behind the scenes, we need to learn why it went wrong in the first place. Fix the issue first, then learn. The advantage of recording it is that we have that record. So I appreciate that Friday, the most important thing is fix the issue. At Friday night, fix the issue. Don't bother about recording it or the channel. Use whoever you need to talk to get it done, because that's the most important thing that the resident wants, and be you as well. But let's make sure we record it. Because why did it happen? What could we have done better? settling point. So that's the only thing I would stress. And again, that goes back to what Cole said through the motion that he did, that we're not getting the visibility of this. You're not seeing what's going on. You're not learning from it. And that's why it's been so, I mean, and it's painful for everybody that we've had to shine a light on areas that are really important.
Okay.
I probably leave it to that.
All right, thank you very much indeed, thank you. I know the Chief Executive is going to go at 3 o'clock. Can I seamlessly move on to Councillor McCarthy and her interrogation? It would be helpful if you could stay for a few minutes, Chief Executive. You're running to the phones, right? Yes. Can we note the report? Great, thank you.
Please.
Okay.
By magic. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for inviting us to come and update you this afternoon. What we're going to be talking about now, I think the slides are being operated remotely from upstairs, if I've understood correctly. So if we can go on to the next one, sets out what we're going to be doing this afternoon. Is that right? That Susan's doing it from upstairs. Okay. So we've already been to scrutiny and had a good wide-ranging discussion on the portfolio. So what we've brought to you this afternoon are the items the external auditors were concerned about and an update on SEND sufficiency and the actions we're taking, which come from the Directorate Assurance work. So if I can have the slides about the portfolio responsibilities. No. I'll carry on
If
talking.
Shumen's upstairs, you need a longer broom handle.
She has confirmed that she can hear us, so let me keep talking and we'll catch up, because the first two slides are just about the portfolio responsibilities. So you're aware that the children's services have been put back into one portfolio, and we now have a director. Oh, it says Director of Education and Skills. Sue is actually our Director of Children's Services. And that's important because it is the term that's recognised across the country. So actually Sue's portfolio is slightly different to mine. I would love to have libraries, but I don't. Sue does. So I'm the lead member for Children's Services, and that's a statutory role. We are going to have to contact Sue and oh, she's appeared. That's why. No, that's why you're not changing it, because on the way down. Right. I'm on portfolio responsibilities now, Susan. So that's political accountability for all the local authorities' children's services, including education and children's social care. And that's a post that the council has to have by law.
We've got the Liverpool echo again.
If you're wondering why I'm laughing at the thought of being responsible by law, it's because I've got my voice coming back at me from the row behind.
Yes, for anybody
I do take it
we have got
incredibly.
an echo going on in the room.
I do take it incredibly seriously, and the next item on the list is safeguarding children and young people, which involves working with statutory partners. Sue and I have been at the Birmingham Safeguarding Children's Partnership Board this morning, and they are just the most exceptional group of people from all the relevant partners. covering general work, education, training and development of professionals, but also the messages that need to be got out to parents, such as the work they've been doing. Headlines, never ever shake a baby. From that kind of general work to the specifics of serious case reviews when something's gone wrong. So a really challenging part of the portfolio, but the partners are just so good. Children's services right across the range. So all our children and young people, but particularly the most disadvantaged and vulnerable, and the families and carers that support them. Our children's social care is in a trust, and it's my responsibility to oversee the client side of that relationship and also have a good working relationship with the trust, which I think I do. I hope I do. Overseeing early years, so around sufficiency of places, the citywide early years health and wellbeing offer, and again, the communication with parents of very young children about how we can support them. Corporate parenting, this I thought would be particularly challenging, but the young people who represent their peers through the looked after children's groups and the care leavers group are a delight to work with. In particular, the care leavers group are very articulate about where support for them could be improved, and they've done a piece of work over the summer about what they feel is necessary in terms of cost of living support, which is at least of the quality that we're seeing from groups representing adult citizens. So that's a highlight of what I've been doing so far. Lead member on the special educational needs and disability agenda across Birmingham's organisations, and holding officers and partners to account for the delivery of the SEND strategy, which includes inclusion of children with additional needs. Education, which is the main element that's come back into the portfolio this year. Youth engagement and youth service, and skills and entrepreneurship in schools. So my portfolio is about the direct services for children. I should just say before I move on that if we're going to be a child-friendly city, everyone right across the council needs to be signed up to it. The obvious ones are around housing and travel and benefits, but also adult services, so that our young people see positive models of support for older people with disabilities. Absolutely everything that the council does needs to be aligned if we're going to get that status. But for today, we're going to look at children's travel and SEND. So moving on to the external auditor's report on children's travel. It was really clear from their report that the service was not achieving what it needed to do, and significant improvement was needed. And that goes across both the recommendations that they made. So I'll do the headlines, and then I'll hand over to Sue and to John to talk in more detail and answer your questions on that. And then we'll come back to the SEND issues. So we believe that significant progress has been made this year to mitigate the issues that blighted the start of the previous 2 academic years. A lot of work was done over the summer, and a team was set up in Woodcock Street so that there was an operational base for the start of the autumn term. Performance has been strong, and the percentages look very good, but 0.5% of nearly 5,000 children is still a significant number of families affected when things didn't go entirely to plan. And we all recognise that where something went wrong at the start of term, that was distressing and disruptive. And for parents who've been through it in previous years, the stress and adrenaline levels will have hit the ceiling, because they will have believed that we hadn't managed to make those changes. It's no use telling somebody that we've hit 99.5% success rate if they're sitting on their phone trying to get an answer. They're in tears, the child's in tears, or it's impacting on their behaviour for at least that day. We had good feedback from providers, from parents, and from special schools in particular, which is great because they're seeing how it works for a number of children. People we've spoken to have recognised that communication is better this year, which is something that team in Woodcock Street and the contact centre have been working so hard on. And between us, we had a fairly low number of direct contacts from parents whose problems hadn't been resolved. I think I had 5 in the first week, which was very much less than I was expecting. John and his team were dealing with those queries promptly, and the whole range of problems that they were dealing with before they came near me and Sue. So always remembering that we recognise that anything off 100% means somebody is distressed and disrupted. Those figures are so much better than in previous years. Sue, do you want to take us through the next couple of slides and bring John in as needed?
Yeah, happy to do that. And I do think while we always regret any one child being late to school or not making it to school, those figures hold their own across the country with other homeschool transport services, and we are definitely. We're not saying everything was perfect, because it wasn't, and to be frank, it never will be. There will always be things that go wrong. The feedback I got from parents was when they rang the service, they were very angry, rightly so, but they got a very prompt response. In some cases, they didn't need to ring the service because the service rang them proactively. When we spotted that somebody was unhappy on social media, it did not come to us before, we reached out to them. And that's what we should be doing, that's our job. So I'm not saying we're doing anything special, but what I am saying is that didn't always happen consistently in the past, but it has now. So thanks, Councillor McCarthy. Our improvement programme, you can kind of see the results this year of the improvement programme. And it was quite, we only launched the improvement programme back in March. And actually, we're now already starting with our improvement programme for next September. That will give us more leading time, because we're always improving. But clearly there were some very important recommendations in those external reports, which we had to make sure and assure ourselves and assure Councillor McCarthy, as our member, that we've met those recommendations. I chair an improvement board of the homeschool transport team, and the team, as you would expect, have an action plan that's broken into work streams. And the big focus in the last couple of months, of course, has been mobilisation. Our next focus that we're moving towards is finance, because we need to make sure we've got a financially sustainable service. But that programme board meets on a monthly basis, reports the actual stats that we've got at the time, and we have open and honest discussions about what's going right, what's going wrong, and how we can work together across our providers, across our guides, obviously working with parents and carers as well to make those changes. So we have completely changed the structure actually of the team. It didn't really make sense operationally, the way that it was structured. And I'll hand over to John just to say a bit about how we've changed that team. So now the process does make a bit more sense.
Sure, thank you. So, so we've looked at the ways in which the service would operate and ensured that we bring together the elements of, for example, risk assessment and compliance under the same umbrella, so that the team's operating as a much more smooth running machine. So organisationally, we know that the particular leads in those areas are looking after the areas that they should do, and that allows us to have much more structure and governance and rigour as we kind of manage our work streams. As Sue mentioned, the programme board, which oversees the whole of our improvement, focuses on a number of key work streams, as you would expect in any transformation programme or project, and that allows us to concentrate on contracts, commercial structure, our communications and our engagement, and also the kind of operational element of that. So it's now bringing it into a much more aligned process and removing any of these silos that would have existed in the past, so that we're running as a much more smooth running machine. Shall I carry on with some of this? Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. So not only that, we've obviously put together a lot of the safeguarding and the policy work, and we're now making sure that we carry out some of that DBS checking in-house. So whereas in the past we would have done some of that externally and then relied on our providers to advise us that those DBS checks have taken place, we recognise that that's a risk that we're not willing to take. We've brought that in-house, and there's a programme at the moment that's delivering that. And as of November, we'll be doing those DBS checks ourselves. We talked a little about complaints, and we recognise that any complaint is kind of a child at the heart of it. So we have definitely reduced our complaints, and as Councillor McCarthy said, and Sue said, we tried to mitigate those even through sort of spotting things on social media and using some of the channels available to us to preempt any of those complaints. But not only are we talking the talk, we're starting to walk the walk. So in my senior management team, I post on a weekly basis, we introduce our first item on the agenda as a child's moment. And we actually talk about an incident or something that we've learned in the week that goes back to that child. And so we're really starting to build this culture that this isn't just a process, this is there's a child at the heart of that. Some of the work that we're also doing as part of our improvement programme is looking at our procurement standards. So not only are we using external providers to help us with that transport, but we're also looking at what those contracts look like, having stronger terms and conditions in place, and the ability to hold those providers their feet to the fire if they're not delivering the high level of service that we would expect. So if I may jump onto the next slide, if that's okay.
I think you're at the bottom of that one.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so I mentioned that sort of that procurement work, but actually we're having some longer term, more partnership focused procurement contracts in place as well that allows us to have a more sustainable relationship with our partners and brings in a little bit of stability for them too. Sorry.
Well, I'll just catch up, John. I'll update that we have recruited a 2-year fixed term assistant director. We're just going through the HR process at the moment, so I can't announce the name of that person, but they're a very experienced leader of home to school transport, and it was a very positive interview process. We had partners, stakeholders, children and young people, and everybody involved in that process was very happy with the appointment. So again, we're building that stability, aren't we, John?
Yes.
Around some permanent leadership, recognising it's an improvement journey that this service is on. The idea is that in 2 years, we won't need a bespoke AD for that service. It will go back into commissioning where it should be. But at the moment, we recognise that there's a big culture shift to embed, and we have got to get to grips with the finance, which isn't the focus of today's discussion, but will be the focus of future meetings, I'm sure.
Okay, John.
Thank you. Yeah, and not only does that sort of show at the most senior level, bringing in that 2-year fixed contract, we're also got a glide path to bringing permanency into the team. Something that we've recognised in the past is that a number of interims have left with corporate memory, corporate knowledge, actually having a better understanding of what that permanency looks like, and we're starting to transition across to that over the coming months. And I think we just wanted to share a little bit of the feedback that we've received. It's all very well and good, the three of us telling you how September went, but actually, you know, we've had a number of external voices passing on some really positive feedback. And what was lovely, actually, I attended the Birmingham Special Teachers Forum. At the very start of that session, the chair asked if there was any lessons learned or any little tidbits that they wanted to share from their first meeting back. And one of our colleagues at a special school in Birmingham actually said he wanted to applaud all the hard work that we've done over that summer period to get them ready for that September mobilisation. So I was really pleased to hear external voices saying that. And we talked a little bit about complaints that come in to the Chief Executive. Actually, we received a complaint that came in by the Chief Executive. We were able to pick that up, deal with that, work with the parent and the child to make sure that we could successfully deal with that complaint in an empathetic and very caring way. And what was lovely was that the parent wrote back to us actually saying thank you, that we've taken on board their issues.
So a couple of these parents have joined our focus group to work with John on service improvements moving forward. So we're really pleased that parents are responding well to us reaching out to them, even after having negative experiences. They don't want other people to have negative experiences. So I'm very, very grateful that they're sharing their experiences and working with us to try to preempt in future rather than just respond when things go wrong. We obviously don't want things to go wrong. So the more we work with our parents, our special head teachers in particular, but also some mainstream heads, we're all on the same team, aren't we? We want the same thing. So that joint working is critical moving forward, isn't it, John?
Yeah, and we're working really closely with the Parent Carer Forum as well, and using their networks to make sure that we're hearing what our parents and our children are saying to us. And Sue mentioned the focus groups that we're building. And towards the end of the year, we're going to host some called Birmingham 100, which will be bringing together a large number of voices to make sure that we're hearing and having a dialogue with our parents rather than just us having a one-way conversation.
Both Sue and I picked up positive feedback just from people that we were talking to when we were out and about. So that was good. Shall we pause here and take any questions?
Yes, I think it would be
Specifically on
true.
this?
Yes. Colin's got any comments or questions?
Yeah. Sorry, I've just got a few. Just in terms of the complaints, and whilst I appreciate is that what are, just so I'm able to understand, what are the type of complaints that you're still seeing? And if you're, maybe if you can answer that, and then I might follow up. Sorry.
Okay, yeah. So I mean, probably some of the trends that we've seen are where changes have occurred, and so in the last academic year, it might be that a child was travelling to school on a particular journey at a particular time, with a particular driver and a particular guide.
Yeah.
And because of the way we've routed this year, because new children have come on and new children have come off, we've had to realign our route to make sure that that works in a slightly different way, and that has resulted in some changes for the child. So in some cases, we've had complaints where the child may have had Sue as a guide, and now the guide is no longer Sue, it's Bob or John or whatever. But there's a number of complaints that come in there. Where we can, we try and keep that consistency, but not always are we able to do that. So we've had some complaints there. We've also had some complaints where perhaps the parent found out late that maybe changes to the route. Absolutely, there was some breakdowns in communication channels there. We were able to fix that and make sure that we've got a better way of capturing contact details of parents, and therefore we're not just reliant on certain channels now. We can actually email, text, and contact parents in different ways. So we picked up those sort of key trends, I would say.
So just so I'm understanding that, but in terms of, we know in advance ahead of September where children are going to be. And yes, I appreciate the route has to be planned and calculated and distance measured and times, because we can only have to follow the transport for so long, and it might be that actually, yes, they need to be moved. But for particular complaints like that, I mean, should they be occurring in the first place on the basis that we know well ahead of the summer actually where the children are going to be, and that actually you are going to have a number of or the majority of your kids potentially are going to be requiring to head to school once they take school transport throughout the period that they are at a particular school. And so is that actually we're falling down, and actually we could be doing communications far, it shouldn't be September, but actually you say, by the way, you're on this different.
I think you're right. There's always the ability to improve that, and certainly there are things that we could do better to communicate. I absolutely agree with you there. The vast majority of children don't have a change to their guide and their driver, but guides will retire, move house, children move house, new children will come on, new children will come off, and sometimes that doesn't happen until quite late in the summer holidays. So where those examples are occurring, it often has an impact on the route itself, and so things do change because of a result of circumstances, both with our guides, drivers, and our children. The small number of complaints that we've received this year tended to kind of coalesce around those subjects. That's not to say there's a massive spike of children that are unhappy that the guide has changed. So I think it's easy for us to kind of say that's a trend, but actually it's still quite a small amount of queries that are coming in, and I don't want to make it sound like there's a lot there, but you're absolutely right, there's still more we can do to improve that over some period.
And it's more to do with that as opposed to any issues with the contractors, with the drivers themselves. So it is not something that needs to be taken up with there is a letdown by them, or they're not fulfilling the terms of their contract or anything like that. It's that side.
Absolutely. And what we can do over the summer period is actually start to share that narrative that we will always aim to keep that consistency, but sometimes things will change, and it's perhaps about building parents' expectations earlier in the summer, so that actually we're not having that conversation in September when people are feeling quite stressed.
And regardless of the vehicle being used, it's not a bus route system, it's a door-to-door. system.
No.
So any change then impacts the rest of the children. And of course, some of the children have one-to-one travel, others are in groups, and there's been a small number that had to be changed on that as well. So
it's an ongoing challenge to keep our data updated, isn't it, John? So obviously we're looking to digital means of doing that in a safe way, but you sometimes we have one place where a child wasn't living with mum anymore, they were living with dad. Nobody thought to tell us that, so that, of course the taxi went to the wrong place, but we haven't had that updated system. The schools obviously are off in that 6 weeks, so it's about making sure we're working with schools early in June, and next year we will be able to do that in a more timely way. We like to offer everyone a meet and greet that's got a different guide or a different driver. That wasn't possible in every case. And of course, where we got the complaints, we hadn't had that meet and greet. We didn't get the complaints where we'd have the meet and greet. So much better, but needs to be better again. And those are the even better if that we're making sure that next time we do that. Although, as John said, there will always be some very short notice. And we're talking relatively few cases. But we want every child to have a great start to their school day, every child, and that's the ambition, and that will remain the ambition.
Councillor Son.
Just very brief questions from me. You mentioned about the DBS is coming in-house. Is that November, did you say that?
We've initiated a programme already to start doing that, and I expect that it will be concluded by the end of October.
So I did remember you saying something, I didn't quite miss that. Two of the little questions. You mentioned that some of the complaints went to the chief exec. Did they just go straight direct to the chief exec, or did they just go through all the channels and then end up going
straight to the chief executive? And they were via Twitter, so we picked them. We started a program of monitoring social media in advance so that we could spot those early. But yeah, somebody had just tweeted at CEO.
And that comes from people's past experience that that's what they needed to do.
Because the early discussion was about complaints. So I
Yes.
just wanted to see if they actually come through, because why would they go straight to the chief exec? Did they not follow the process? But that's okay. Quick question for me is, what's the longest journey for some of the children? Because we did have that complaint a couple of years ago where they were there for about 2 hours or something. So
I don't have the exact detail off the top of my head. I know there are some journeys that are over an hour, but that is generally because the child's school is way out of the patch, and so it's more to do with the geography and the distance than
not picking all the children up together.
yeah. Where we route, we absolutely aim to minimise the amount of time on the vehicle for the child.
Right, okay, thank you. Well, you'll be aware, no doubt, that the external auditors at Thornton have identified home to school transport as one of our primary risks, and also the SEND services. So I've no doubt that he will be looking quite closely at the improvements that you've made, and we'll look forward to his comments in the next year. What I wanted to do from the chair is turn to the safeguarding and corporate parenting aspect of the portfolio.
Okay, well, we've got the other point from the external auditors report that we were planning to cover. Do you want to take those points that we haven't actually prepared?
Well,
it was a conversation.
Well, it was a specific case that has had a fair amount of publicity via the coroner and the serious case review, and it's Hakim Hussein who sadly died. What concerned me, and if I've got it wrong, I apologise in advance, and it wasn't on your watch, Councillor McCarthy, or yours, sir. But I think I need some assurance from the chair, and as an individual councillor with responsibilities over this case and the general way that it was dealt with. As I understand, a decision was taken to take this young boy into care because of the home conditions on a Friday afternoon. And it was intended that the child should be taken into care on the Monday. Sadly, the child died over the weekend and it didn't happen. And I would welcome, you've obviously had a serious case review over this particular case. Could you tell me what steps you have taken to ensure that this could not happen again?
I mean, this case goes back to 2017.
Yeah, I know.
And a whole range of agencies were identified as at fault. Serious case review, which was recently published. The time delay was due to the legal proceedings involved in the case. So much of the learning has already taken place, because you don't wait for the results of the serious case review. People look at their own practice and reflect on what they're able to change. And the partnership working on that, from my point of view, has been exceptional. Every aspect of the case was distressing, not least that a decision had been made and Hakim died before it could be put into effect. But work like a wholesale review of asthma protocols in health and how those were communicated across the whole range of organisations involved have shown a real commitment to working together to reduce the number of serious incidents. We'll never entirely get rid of terrible things happening to children, particularly in a city like Birmingham with over 1 million people. So it's about risk reduction, harm reduction. There are other cases in the pipeline, again, from some years ago, because you have to wait for the police and courts to work their way through the processes. So it's about risk reduction, harm reduction.
So I would, if you want assurance, if you look at the latest focus visits from Ofsted, the Ofsted did find much improved services when we compare to Ofsted reports from 2017. Processes have improved. We've now got a neglect strategy across our partnership, which sadly wasn't in place when Hakeem died. And we had over 100 practitioners actually on Monday, didn't we, at the practitioner forum, all coming together from all professions, from health, visiting to school teachers, you know, across the whole ring, with social workers, to talk about and understand neglect and what's the impact of neglect. Because when we think about that decision making, you could say, why wasn't that decision made a long time before it was actually made? And the lessons were learned in good faith. There was openness and transparency around practitioners exploring what happened and thinking about what do we need to learn. Those lessons have also been shared across all our teams, and we're continually reminding our colleagues of the lived experiences of children who are suffering from neglect and how easy it is actually to miss those children who don't perhaps display aggressive behaviours or they get on with their lives. And it's all our professionals' duty to be professionally curious and share information. And sadly, these lessons come for all too many serious case reviews. But we continue to share those messages. And as Councillor McCarthy said, every serious case review is taken very seriously. But we do have a good reputation with Ofsted for improving our services. Obviously, we didn't have Birmingham Children's Trust at that point. Now we have the trust in place and we have more robust processes in place. That said, an horrific incident can always happen anywhere, no matter how good your systems and processes are. But the kind of gaps in the services that were revealed through the serious case review around the key, those gaps in the services aren't there now. There's much closer partnership working.
Okay. The point that I'm trying to make, I'm not trying to score any points because I think it is an issue. When I read it, it upset me. Had that decision to take Hakeem into care on a Thursday could have ended up with a different outcome.
Yes. Let's say if people want to actually read the full report and see how many of the organisations that Hakeem came into contact with might have done something differently. The learning has been profound right across education, health, ourselves, and the trust. And in fact, has been used for much wider learning
Yes.
for other safeguarding.
I was a non-exec on BCHC for a number of years, and it really is trying to seek your assurances that learning has been taken to heart, and that I know from previous experience the complexity of these decisions, but it's the immediacy of actions being taken. So,
And if I can
thank you for
take
the
this
assurance.
opportunity to thank and praise Penny Thompson, who chairs the Safeguarding Children Partnership, who led on the reporting when the report was published recently, so that no one organisation could be tempted to try and say, well, it wasn't really us, it was somebody else. Everybody,
We've got a collective responsibility.
absolutely, and that held together
Yeah.
on the publication day.
Thank you. Thank you for the assurance. It's important. And I think we've got a record of assurance as well in the minutes, which is important as for us as corporate parents. Thank you. Is there any other questions or any other comments that colleagues would like to make? Or
Shall we go on to our SEND report? So again, the auditors were concerned. Inspections have shown that SEND services were not where they needed to be and subsequently haven't improved enough. So we are in a situation where we have a commissioner and a SEND improvement board which meets regularly to progress the accelerated progress plan. I mean, from my point of view, to come into role and have this detailed piece of work there already showing what improvements needed to be made was a real positive. And Sue, having only started a short time before me, I'm sure, can back that up. So the recommendations made by the Commissioner have been accepted by the Council, and the action plan is in place to take that forward. And the Commissioner has been really good in talking to stakeholders, including staff within the Directorate, and members will remember that he actually held a session for yourselves, at which you could ask anything that you wanted to ask on that. Should we have another pause for any questions on that before I go on to the Directorate assurance?
no, Steve.
Okay. And then we're on to the Directorate assurance statement, so I'll hand it over to Sue to take us through those slides, and I'll come in if I need it.
Okay, again, it's quite an old audit report reference, but it's important that we do have closure on it and that you do have that assurance that says, although improvements have been made since 2016, the arrangements for compilation and submission of our return, organisational changes in particular directorate structures and introduction of the Children's Trust has adversely impacted on embedding the process. So obviously we've had a lot of change and continue to have a lot of change. So I wanted to give you some reassurance there around our Section 11 return, making sure that the Council is able to have the process that it needs to have. So this year we've agreed that myself as the Director of Children's Services will undertake the role of City Council Senior Board level lead. So in other words, we've now got our corporate safeguarding group where all the other directors are on it alongside our legal colleagues and monitoring officer to make sure that we've got a grip of our Section 11 return, because safeguarding is everybody's business, isn't it? So whether it's leisure or whether it's housing or whether it's children's, we're all responsible. So we thought that the clearest way of having that accountability is to have a group that is chaired by myself, and we meet regularly and we agree our self-evaluation, and obviously self-evaluation informs our Section 11 return. So we're establishing a corporate safeguarding network so that every directorate has a formal nominated safeguarding lead, and those safeguarding leads report in to myself as the chair of that group and make sure that we're driving those improvements for safeguarding arrangements for children, and that includes safer recruitment, staff training, because obviously we're a big organisation, there's a lot of churn across our organisation, and it's making sure that we keep on top of those basic safeguarding processes and that we're all assured that in each directorate we've got a grip of those. So this network is supporting and monitoring the progress of a Safeguarding Children's Action Plan, and that plan is going to be informed by any outstanding actions from previous Section 11 audits. So we're pulling together that action plan as we speak, and the Safeguarding Network Group will be held accountable for delivering that plan. We're then programmed in to report our progress against that action plan to the corporate leadership team on a quarterly basis to assure the chief executive and the leadership team that those actions are going to plan and that they will be completed. And thereafter, even when we signed off those actions, clearly there will be other actions in the action plan which the group needs to be decided on. The role of directorate designated safeguarding leads is now included in the safeguarding action plan, and that will be taken forward. So what we're trying to do is embed a process which wasn't very clear before, but now we've got that clear and formal accountability built in. CLT also supported the development of a draft corporate safeguarding policy on the 6th of June 2022, so not very long ago, and we're finalising that policy in order to present that to Cabinet for formal sign-off in the new year. So we are putting those things in place that really need to be in place. Next steps, we've not yet published the Directorate's improvement plan. It's at the final stages now, but just to reassure you that these actions regarding corporate safeguarding are also built into the Children's Services Directorate's improvement plan, and that we'll monitor through our own improvement plan monitoring processes. We've actually establishing an improvement board for children's services that will have an external chair, so even more scrutiny around the corporate safeguarding arrangements, because they will also be included in my plan. And of course, we'll continue to provide updates to the audit committee for assurance purposes. So hopefully that does provide some reassurance that we're putting the right structures and processes in place. And the next topic was self-sufficiency, so it might be helpful to pause there. Chair, if anyone's got any comments
You're going to talk?
about the corporate
So clear.
safeguarding.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Obviously, when I say obviously, it's obvious to me because I'm living it, it may not be obvious to your committee, but there are significant pressures on numbers of special school places. And again, hindsight's a wonderful thing, but actually, the pressures hitting us now, and there are a number of children, around 100 at the moment, who have a need for a special school place, and that's recognised in their education, health and care plan. And there is not an appropriate special school place for those children. So what we're doing with those children, it's not ideal, but I don't want you to think that we're just leaving them out of school. We are supporting them in the current setting that they're in, or we're supporting them at home through the home bridging team, but clearly it is not ideal. So we're working very hard on a sufficiency plan, a 5-year plan, to present the numbers of places for all the different needs around special needs and how we're going to fulfil those numbers of places. We have put a bid into the Department of Education for 3 new special schools under the free school programme, because that's the way that you have new schools now. Councils can't open one and build them themselves, but we bid through the free school programme. They will take at least a year to build. So we're going to be in this position for at least 18 months of having insufficient special school places. We did put an extra, we put an extra nearly 100 places into the system by expanding our existing special schools. And I'd like to thank the special school head teachers that have worked really closely with us, literally squeezing children in without going over health and safety rules. And so we have done our best and continue to do our best to work with the existing providers and existing providers in our neighbouring local authorities as well, some of whom are physically closer than Birmingham special schools. So we continue to work with every child who needs a school place, but absolutely we need to be very open and transparent about the pressure this is putting on families, the worry that it's causing. We do have a home bridging team to wrap around support, but it's not a special school place that they require. So it still is a risk, and it will remain a risk while we put our sufficiency strategy together. We have had a very initial first draft looking at census data, and we've been working on this since April. We'll be in a position towards the end of the year to share what the sufficiency strategy is, but you can imagine the amount of work that's going in to check and double check that strategy, because that strategy has got to be built on the right numbers, got to look at the forecast of demand that's coming through. And we need to make sure that when we've got a strategy, it's an accurate one, and we can't afford a false start with that. So we have been working on it since April, but it's not yet ready to share. But as soon as it is, it will be published and brought to cabinet and adopted as a formal strategy. And I can only apologise on behalf of the council to those parents who are awaiting a special school place for their child, to which their child is entitled. But we're just not in a position at the minute to deliver.
Tilly was one or two cases. Any comments?
I just was just wondering about that. If we're unable to, if the child's plan has been agreed and there has been certain provisions that we have to provide for them, but we are unable to do that, is there any, in terms of risk, financial exposure, because we're unable to deliver what we are supposed to provide? Have we looked at that, and do we know if it's going to be for a minimum of 18 months? Do we know kind of the costings for any of that? And then also, is it just the provision in terms of places or additional services that they may well need in terms of speech and language therapy, everything like that? Is that separate, and are we able to manage those, and there is a deficiency in that respect? Is it just the school places, or are we also to deficit or in terms of what we can external?
Can I answer that question first, and then go on to the costing? You're quite right. For some children, they've got very complex needs.
Yeah.
And so what we'll do is work on, if it's speech and language, how can we get speech and language support? Now, unfortunately, speech and language is one of those areas that actually has quite long waiting lists. And the SEND Improvement Board does hold all partners to account, me for special school places, but health colleagues for speech and language waiting lists. We wouldn't say because you've not got your school place, you don't get any of the other support. In fact, we're working really hard to put support in wherever we can to keep those children educated whilst they're not in the setting they should be. And we're working, mainstream schools have been amazing, and we're putting all the resources into those mainstream schools to help, whether that's extra teaching assistants or extra adults in the room. And many children are actually managing okay, but managing okay clearly isn't good enough. There is a minority of parents, but they are a minority, have chosen to take their child out of the mainstream setting and educate them at home. There's a lot of pressure on them when that's the case. So again, we've got home tuition. It's not ideal, and if they needed therapy or any other health services, they will be provided in the home, assuming that the waiting list enables them to access that support. So that the system is really quite a broken system, and we're talking at national levels, aren't we, as well as in Birmingham. How can we operate differently? So we've got some pilot work going on at the moment in Castle Vale around very young children in the nursery school who are they're on these long waiting lists for help. And rather than wait for diagnosis, we're looking at what support multi-agency we can put into those children and families without having to wait for diagnosis. And there'll be some really good learning from that pilot. So hopefully we can start in the end to work in a different way. That means people can access support more readily without having to go through a lot of different hurdles around diagnoses. But that's the situation regarding, it's our job to make sure they get the support we need, even if they've not got a special school place. That doesn't absolve us from the rest of the responsibility. So we work really hard, and we've actually got a dedicated placements team now because we've restructured the SEND teams, and those placements teams are working really early on to try to not be so reactive, but obviously work with families to make sure that we know early on where those children need to be. We haven't actually calculated the financial risk. Some families have taken us to tribunal, so obviously there's financial spend there. Unfortunately, all the tribunal can do is direct admission of the special school, but if that takes the numbers in the school to over the health and safety limit, then there's a real dilemma, isn't there? Because nobody would want to put any child at risk by saying, well, health and safety is going to be compromised. So again, it's about working with families on what compromise can we put in there. Because unfortunately, the tribunal can't sort this because there aren't local places. If there are places further away, There's obviously issues around travel and transport, but we're really working hard to support parents with their own personal budgets, with transport, if they'd rather transport their own children, working with John's team to put transport in. I could spend a long time updating you on individual cases because we're working really hard to meet their needs. But the fact is we should have a sufficiency strategy that explains year on year what places we need and how we're going to provide them. The other bit of the sufficiency strategy isn't just special school places, but there's a real need for more resource provision in our mainstream schools. So the head teachers are really keen to work with me to develop better inclusion facilities so that actually a child might not need a special school place if there was adequately resource provision. And head teachers are quite desperate for that. And that investment needs to be captured in the sufficiency strategy as well. So the sufficiency strategy will have everything. It won't just be the special school places. It'll also have the requirements for resource provision. So if we can keep children in their local school well supported, then of course there's impacts on transport, and the special schools can be very specialist for those children with really complex, extremely complex needs. So that's why it's such a big piece of work. And of course, we're working with our special school head teachers on that piece of work as well, and our parent care forum. And I can keep you updated with that.
And of course, it's an important part of the Send Improvement Board's work. At the last meeting, we were looking particularly at speech and language therapies.
Okay. All right.
Okay. We're done for our
We're done.
presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. Any more questions?
I was just going to ask a very quick question, a very brief question on the EHCH feedback. How does, clearly there's issues, the parents know there's something not right, the GPs have suggested it, yet the plan comes back that there's no issues with this child and the schools are refusing to take a particular child on. What's the process in that?
Well, there is an appeals process.
Yeah.
But if, for whatever reason, there's been a judgment from the team that this child doesn't need an education, health and care plan, we do have a ways forward meeting at that point with the family that says, well, if your child doesn't need an education, health and care plan, what do you think we need? What support do we put in? But again, people do make mistakes, so there is also an appeal process. And we continue to work with schools as well, because actually, if a school's saying we can't take this child because of their needs and they've not got an education, health and care plan, we would want to talk to that school to understand what is it about that child then, if they don't require an education, health and care plan, but what are the challenges and how can we support the school to support that young person. So we kind of call it the team around school, and it also links to early help. So every child with an education, health and care plan, although if you don't hit the threshold, I appreciate that's not going to be, but there's an early help offer that schools are engaged with. And if you do have an education, health and care plan, there's been an acceptance that we have to make sure that early help offer is applicable. But as ever, we're on an improvement journey with our Senna service, in the council side of things, and I've been very open about that. And I'll say to councillors, and have said to head teachers as well, if you remain concerned, you need to let me know so I can double check what is going on. We've seen some good improvements in the service and we've got more consistency now than we've had before, but we've still got over 80% agency staff in the Senate service. So there isn't going to be the consistency of practice that we would ideally want. I mean, there are some brilliant frontline workers who are agency workers doing some brilliant work, so I don't want to not their morale. But the fact is, we need to build consistency and relationships in that team, and that's a whole extra piece of work in the improvement journey, which of course the Send Improvement Board is keeping their eye on. So I hope that answers your question, but if you want to pick up any casework with me, councillor, please let me see the details.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Now, because of pressure on time, we need to bring forward item 13, which is Grant Thornton's report. John Roberts was due to leave us at 3:45. I don't know whether John is still there. if he's not, could Nicole take up the report? I see you there, John.
I am, Chair, but only to say apologies for me now. I really do have to leave. So, Nicola is briefed, and she will take you through the report.
I apologise for the fact that we've overrun. So we'll quiz Nicole.
Great, and it was very.
Sorry, is it a new?
Nicola is Laurel Lynn's replacement as a senior manager on the audit for people that need to sort of understand where she fits in the team. So I'll leave you in its capable hands.
Jacoba.
Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. Given that John has had to go, if you wanted to move this back to the original point in the agenda, I'm quite. I'll be around for the duration of the meeting anyway, but I'm happy to take it now as you wish.
We'll take it now as we've taken the decision. So.
Okay. So when we presented our audit plan a couple of months ago, we said we'd follow up with the VFM specific plan, and it's this document that you have before you. Now, there's a fair bit of background in there for information. So for new members of the committee, while I won't go through it all, our responsibilities and the requirements in relation to the value for money work are set out by the National Audit Office. So there's sort of very prescribed approach that we're required to follow. And we're specifically required to consider the council's arrangements in relation to 3 specified criteria, which are financial sustainability, governance, and how it improves its economy efficiency and effectiveness. The specific details behind which are set out in the first appendix, which starts on page 10 of our report and page 106 of your pack. So that just sets out the specific details under those 3 criteria that we go into. But in addition to those sort of 3 criteria, we also required to consider any other areas of significant weakness we might identify. And pages 102 to 104 of your report pack set out those areas. And we've sort of identified those areas of risks, both from our sort of ongoing knowledge of the council, review of relevant documentation, and also discussions with officers. And it's those that we believe warrant audit attention as part of that VFM remit. So we'll follow up on all of last year's recommendations as a matter of course, but there are some topics that we think are appropriate to keep on the radar for continued deep dives, as well as the follow-up of prior year recommendations. And those are, as we've just heard and as you've just alluded to, Chair, the home to school and send. And we've obviously just had an update from relevant officers and the member there, as well as the highways PFI contract arrangements. And in addition to those 3 areas, we also are recognising a potential risk in relation to the legacy of the games. Now, you might remember last year we were looking at the sort of funding in relation to the games, so it's a slightly different nuance this time round, as well as housing demand. And again, that's something that's featured on the agenda already today. So I suspect you'll recognise those risks affecting the council. One thing that I did just want to sort of leave you with is that we've given consideration to economic issues, cost of living, energy crisis, and the like, but it's not identified as a specific, separate, significant risk, as we'll cover it as part of our overarching work on financial sustainability. So I wasn't going to say much more than that, to be honest. It was just to present to you the risks that we've identified at this stage. It is an iterative process, so as we go through the work, there may well be other issues that we identify, which we'll flag for your attention as and when they arise, if they do. But happy to take questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nicola. Yes, we've gone through a very successful games. It was delivered on time. Obviously, there will be a review of costings against budget, which I've no doubt you will take an interest in as our external auditors. But the other risks that you've identified, we have discussed 2 of them this afternoon, but you're quite right in identifying the highways PFI and the housing issue that we have continuing. There is one question that I have to ask, and that is, in your letter to the chair of the committee, you of the 13th of September, you did speak about delays. Now, I appreciate that all the auditors have gone through a traumatic experience of separating the consultancy from the audit side, but what other reasons were there for any delays? I'd be grateful if you could help us there.
Yes, of course. So the annual auditors report, which is the document we're referring to in that letter, is a summary of the sort of culmination of all our work. So it will summarise both the results of our review into the council's financial statements, as well as our review into the council's VFM arrangements. The council's financial statements, the deadline for the publication of those accounts is the end of November. And then beyond that, the February date that we supply in that letter is effectively sort of the backstop that the National Audit Office gives us, which is a 3-month sort of window ahead of when the accounts are signed. So that's where that deadline comes from. I'd also remind you that the 2021 annual auditors report, while you've seen a copy of it, it is still open pending the sign off of those financial statements as well. We'll issue a finalised version once those accounts have been signed.
Do we have any comment from Sarah or Ahmed?
The 2021 accounts, in terms of checking up the numbers, is complete now, and hopefully Nicola can confirm that, as far as, unless something new pops up in the next few weeks. But at this point in time, those accounts seem to be complete. There is a national issue regarding the valuation of highways infrastructure that was raised during the audit last year. And other relevant bodies, National Audit Office, have tried to think a way around that, because the way the code is written, the way the accounting standards are written, it's undoable for councils to meet that criteria of record keeping, of going through on-style records to actually look at how much we've spent on assets and how they were depreciated over that life. So at the moment, I believe an act is going before Parliament to exempt councils, or to have an statutory override that we do not need to follow that particular accounting standard to that letter or to that extent. And that was due for September, but we know the events that happened in the last few weeks with the changing government. Queen's funeral, those are now being stored, and I think we're looking at November to December now as the parliamentary date. And once that goes through, that will then allow auditors, and so it's not just Birmingham City Council, there are many councils.
It is, yeah. Yeah, so many councils who hadn't signed off their 2021 accounts and who've got material infrastructure balances are in the same boat, sort of pending the statutory override, which is, as Mohammed said, is sort of expected towards the end of the calendar year now.
I think you can confirm that you're not doing any more work on the 2021 numbers unless unless new information arises.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the assets issue was specifically identified in the SIPFA management code and self-assessment, so that all dovetails together. Okay. Any other comments from colleagues? No. Okay, Nicola, thank you very much indeed, and I'm sorry we couldn't get to you earlier, but I've no doubt you can find something useful to do with the rest of the afternoon.
I would like to stay if I may. I'll turn my video off though, so you don't have to look at me, but I'd like to listen.
If it's that exciting and we've got an audience, you're welcome to stay.
Thank you kindly.
Okay, Nicola, thank you. Can we note that? Yeah, everybody's noted it. Thank you very much. Thank you. Right, return to the agenda. Such excitement. Risk management update.
Thank you, Chair. So the risk management framework sets out how we manage risk across the organisation at all organisational levels. And I work with a group of risk representatives from each directorate to make sure that risk registers are kept up to date and that risk is kept on the agenda. The corporate leadership team and yourselves receive updates around the strategic risk register. That has bubbled up to about 32 risks at one stage. Then we had a workshop to bring them down, and since there's been proposals to add some more on. So we currently have 23 risks. The three new ones, well, actually, it's one we used to have around climate change and air quality, which has been expanded into 4. And they're all quite different. So there's the risk around realistic kinds of planning for some net zero carbon by 2030, for the city to be net zero carbon by 2030. We have a climate resilience city and to address air quality. Now, the first 3 were debated at some length of where they should fit in terms of severity. They are all pretty high likelihood and very high impacts. But the debate was around, we're 8 years away. They're going to get higher, they could get squeezed if we get less time to address them. So with 8 years ago, we've set them in the material part of severe, material to severe, rather than very severe. With the ability to address air quality, can likely go in the heat map. We've also reduced 2 risks. The likelihood rating for future financial resilience has been reduced, and there's also been a reduction in the public health inequalities risk. That's post-pandemic. It was affecting there's more business as usual and more mitigations that can be put into that. And the future financial resilience one being reduced in likelihood of we had the results of last financial year. The size of the gap going forward is not what it was. There are reserves to cover the risks that we've identified. So you have a heat map, which sort of gives you the relative scale that we've considered these risks to be in. We still have 3 in the top right-hand corner: the risk of cyber attacks, the risk of emergency incidents, including terrorism, and the health and safety and property portfolio. I wasn't going to cover anything else unless there are any questions on that.
Councillor Talks, any comments?
Yes, I do, but I am slightly just trying to get my head around the risk strategy. So in terms of, just so that I'm clear on this, so future financial resilience.
It's come down 1 level in likelihood.
So what you think I'm just trying to get good or bad because it's gone up. You think the financial resilience is better than we thought it was, even though, is it taking into account any of the latest?
No, it won't.
Right, so we have to look at that again.
We're taking it from March to September. It would have been taken from March to July. This was nominated for July, but the July meeting was cancelled because of the heat wave. Right. So what I've done, I've tried to just, rather than lose that movement, I've made it a 6-month movement rather than a 3-month movement. So no, it doesn't include any of this week's. Right. So we'll have to predict or the cost of living. Actually, supply chain disruption take into account some of the more global events as well, because supply chain disruption was very much a risk at the end of last year, not knowing how bad it was going to get in terms of gas supply, port strikes, just general things from China or not coming from China, the increased costs of shipping around the world. It's particularly impacting on construction, but also within that risk, we put the supply chain of accident workers, contingent workers. Right. Not so much the recruitment and retention issues, which are in workforce type risks, but certainly the agency supply is also becoming more difficult and more expensive.
The one question I would have on the finance is last week I was at a seminar and they were talking about interest rates going up to 4%. The comment this week has been interest rates going up to 6%. Today, all the building societies have taken off their offers for mortgages off the table and introduced new ones. Inevitably, that's going to have an impact on household incomes. And my concern really is that circa we take £400 million in council tax. Just a 5% wobble on that is going to be £20 million. With everything else, the costs going up as far as the council is concerned, with energy, and you've said it yourself, inflation with suppliers, and inevitably there's going to be increasing demands for increases in salary. That could have an impact on us. Now, it's not going to be immediate. We're not going to feel the pain probably this year, but certainly next financial year, I would have thought we are really going to see the pain of the residents of Birmingham.
So there's two risks. There's a risk to citizens and there's a risk to the council. And I don't know, Niall, do you want to talk about treasury risks at this stage? Because
we talked about that at scrutiny. We can't.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah, there is obviously a risk to us in debt. We take about £60–70 million of debt each year. Part of that's refinancing all the debt, but taking on some new debt and new investments. And the market's very volatile, and we brought a report here to scrutiny, which I won't go over 2 weeks ago. I'll be bringing a treasury management strategy to our November meeting, where we'll talk about what we are doing. It is evolving. Council is very interested. The 50-year gilts this morning were 5%. They're now 3.5% this afternoon.
right.
It's a bit better.
The Bank of England decided to buy gilts in the market.
Yes.
Yeah, so
They're going
it's
to the market.
very volatile. I mean, Council was right last week. If we were writing the strategy, we would have thought 4.5% would be interest rates. This year, this week, we're talking 6–7. Who knows where we'll be at the end of the week? So it is very volatile in the treasury. But what we are going to do is to try and fix as much as we can now.
Right.
If there are products in the market, we can forward borrow. So previously, with interest rates dropping, we kept most of that 600 million requirement variable. So taking opportunities in the market, we may want to now, not to give Sarah or Deb with Becky and more of a headache than they have. We should lock as much of that in so that we've got that fixed values for next year, for 2 years afterwards. We may find out that we jumped the gun and maybe pay slightly higher than we do, because it's better to be safe than sorry, unless at least we really not cash envelope that we have for treasury costs.
Yeah.
Just
And
aware.
both of you nail as much down as we can at the moment.
Yeah, so we're trying to do.
Because at least you know how much your
Exactly.
expenditure is going to be and what you are committed to.
Yeah, we
Otherwise,
had a meeting with the Treasury team yesterday, and
Yeah.
let's not try to beat the market.
Yeah.
Let's get certainty.
So I think it's an ongoing.
The cycle starts again now, so we reset all this in terms of the November meeting.
Yes, okay.
And we will probably, I'll get nominations to delete things that I've been on, go through CLT when it comes here. So I've had a nomination to remove the Commonwealth Games delivery risk. Just
Yes.
through that, more than likely next time.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so so I'm understanding the cyber attacks. What basis is that there's a risk of that? Is it to do with what we don't have enough? The control systems, IT systems aren't sufficiently robust enough.
So we have recently given a very good audit report on cybersecurity. There's an awful lot of work that's done before the games. However, we only know what we know. And the impact is catastrophic. So there are some councils that still haven't recovered after 2 years ago. There are NHS issues and still can't share data with us because of capitalisation. So it's there because of catastrophic impact.
As opposed to we think
we think we've done everything that we can do.
Right, okay, that's what I'm just trying to, because it's saying that's what I'm just trying to work out, whether it is.
We might be able to just like I thought on the back of the audit report that we've done and the things that are put in place. It was a big strategy to make sure that the games couldn't be rejected.
Right.
And you do have a cabinet member at the next committee. So I think Councillor Andy. Yeah, so again, Peter Bishop will be coming in on channel today. Take more in-depth questions on financial.
I know that this is a very live issue and what is going on in the world. Certain countries are upping their activities on because of other organisations involved. Okay, right, can we note that? Thank you. Yes, of course. 2.1, note the progress in implementing the risk management framework and the assurance and oversight provided by the Council leadership team, and review the strategic risks and assess whether further explanation information is required from risk owners in order to satisfy itself that the risk management framework has been consistently applied. Noted. Thank you. Right. Item 9. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair.
This is your first meeting, and I have to thank on behalf of the committee Satinder Shahota for the work that he's done and the contribution in his interim role. But welcome, Janine. Berry, to your first audit committee. I can see the excitement on your face.
Thank you very much, Chair. Absolutely, genuinely, thank you for the invite. I do intend to attend all future meetings of the audit committee. I think it's important in my role as the monitoring officer that I'm also assured of your role in delivering strong scrutiny of our governance and assurance processes. And also, I am in 3 pillars of assurance. I am one of the sources of assurance which you could seek to rely on and challenge as part of making informed decisions around governance and assurance, profiling, health of the organisation as well. So I'm here this afternoon to present the report which Satinder actually wrote, and now I'm here. So my background knowledge of the issues is quite limited, so I'd be very happy to speak if you've got questions on this report, which is item 9, which on my agenda is, I think, page 31. I can meet with you after the committee and obtain further details if you do have any questions on the particular issues. I've been advised by Satinder that this takes us up to more or less the end of August, because obviously we need a cut-off point for the preparation of reports and publication dates, etc. As regards the reason why we bring this report, in the Council's constitution, it is good governance for us to report the waivers that have occurred during the year and to during the breaches that have occurred during the year, and to bring those to your attention. And again, it's part of the theme of the meeting that we've been having actually this afternoon, which is around lessons learned, how to prevent this. Part of my role as a monitoring officer is working with yourselves, listening to your views, working with the Constitution Review Group, which I'm aware is just currently being re-established, as well, about how we can put better controls in place, how we can make sure that we're more informed, and how we can educate our organisation as well to prevent these sorts of scenarios from happening in the future. So it is a bit of a sea change on culture in terms of how to address governance, how to look at assurance, look at decision making. And as part of that, it's vitally important that I work really closely with Sarah and Becky, and also with Sarah Dunleavy, who I've not quite met yet, apart from today, around making sure that we do have a consistent message in place and that we are mindful that this list should over time get much shorter if practically, virtually non-existent.
Thank you.
So that's my aspiration.
Sarah, I know that internal audit who've had a look at a number of these issues. Is there anything that you'd like to draw to our attention?
They are all at a point in time. Data provision, for instance, came out as an issue where there was nothing in place till there was no contract, there was a relationship between our own exclusions division and the provider. We don't know how we really got there because of changing of personnel, but it was very, very quickly put right. I think at the end of it, only one pupil remained with the provider because it was the best outcome for them as HR centre division. That was all brought into place, and then a procurement was put in place. And there still needs to be some agreement of payments. Even things like how much should be paid wasn't written down, and we couldn't find it. Day centres was a post-pandemic reopening. It has been an area that we haven't looked at for some time because we do a risk-based and day centres generally come below the main risk level. But it was just a case of making sure they put the things in place they're supposed to have in place. They keep all the monies, fund monies separate from the council monies and bank everything properly and record things and keep an audit trail. Again, it was just something that, as a reopening, the focus was more on reopening safely, and less on looking at what the financial procedures were that were operated 18 months before. IT procurement and commercial management was post the separation with Service Birmingham. Took a little while to regularize. The recruitment and selection of casual workers, this audit looked at what was recorded on the digital file. So we expected to see right to work checks, DBS checks, etc., recorded on the file. We didn't find them all. It does not mean to say they weren't there locally, because casual workers could be recruited locally. So leisure centres and the school guides, there's all sorts of different organisations in there. That was an immediate mitigation put in place to stop local recruitment of casual workers. So it all went through HR. HR won't complete paperwork, put them on the payroll until all those papers are there.
Okay. From an internal audit point of view, Sarah, are you content, and can you give us the assurance that all these issues have been looked after and internal audit have got processes in place to address the issues?
So from an internal audit point of view, we will do a follow-up. Depending on its severity, depends on the rapidity of the follow-up. So in September, we have now evidenced the recruitment of such casual workers is as we were told it was.
Okay.
So we will take management assurance to some extent, but then we do go back and ask for the evidence as well.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
I don't think we'll be going back to day centres as quickly as we
No.
go back to.
No. Okay. Thank you. Right. Can we note that report then?
Yes, please, Chair, if the committee's minded to.
Right. Thank you. Noted.
Thank you.
Right, the SIP for Financial Management Code self-assessment. Who's taking this?
So, Mr. Chair, alongside, I have Chris Tidswell here joining us today.
Lurking. Larry the lurker.
For the committee's purposes, this report is an annual SIP for financial management self-assessment. So we did this first year, was last year. This is the second year we're bringing the self-assessment report. And what we wanted to do this year was actually do a peer review on it. So SIPFA very kindly accepted to take on that mantle of being our peer reviewer. I am in conversation with core cities and others actually about local authorities peer reviewing local authorities, but it's all very new in train, so we brought SIPFA in. Chris will be presenting to you, so we've got some slides for us to go through so he can give you a sense of what this is about and what the review tells us.
there is a paragraph in the report, paragraph 4.6, that refers to this being brought later in the year. You'll remember that due to the extreme weather in July, the cabinet was, this committee was cancelled, and so that's actually coming now rather than it's coming later. So that's thing to just pick up on. So I'm going to hand over to Chris, and Mohammed is ably running the slides.
Okay.
Okay, so this item, there are two elements. There's the paper that Sarah's been talking about, which has the detailed review against the Financial Management Code standards and principles. What I wanted to do was set the context, so as to remind members about the Financial Management Code. And if you are up to speed with it, my apologies, but I think it's good to remind people about the purpose of the code. Talk about the approach to self-assessment and what we found. And there's a couple of annexes in the slide set, which we won't go through, but for future reference, we're not covered over. So the thing about the Financial Management Code, 21-22 was the first year that it was mandatory for local authorities. It was driven by a number of cases going back a couple of years now, where organisations, whilst they might have appeared to be financially robust, sustainability was a real issue. And it was driven at that time by the well-publicised activities at Northamptonshire, where the organisation crashed. It still crops up. And since then, there have been a number of organisations that have been in that position where they've had to contemplate or actually issued Section 114 notices, which demonstrates clearly they can't deliver against a balanced budget. So the code was written against that backdrop. As with all codes, it's not prescriptive. It details a series of principles that the organisation needs to think about, and then those principles are translated into a series of standards. Again, the standards don't say you should have this or you should have that. It talks about the environment that the organisation should operate within if it's going to deliver strong financial management and governance. It's not a mandatory code in terms of primary legislation, but in terms of the Section 151 officers' role to discharge their duties under the Local Government Act, it will contribute towards that, along with things like the Treasury Management Code, Prudential Code, and other codes that are in place. So our aim as an institute would be something that becomes mandatory from a statutory perspective. But as far as we're concerned now, for all local authorities and police bodies, from 21-22, they have to demonstrate compliance. The important thing for me for the code is that it's about collective ownership of financial management and governance. It's not about just the finance director, the finance team. It's not about services. It's about the whole organisation. So collectively, does the organisation know where it is? So elected members, cabinet, and the corporate leadership team, do they understand, do they see the financial position of the organisation, understand it and mitigate the risk? And it's a fundamental role of this committee as well to be able to understand and see that. So in terms of assessing compliance, the code is based on principles, as I say, but organisations themselves undertake that assessment, which I find interesting, which is why it's always valuable to have a peer review or an independent review. It's not particularly healthy to mark your own homework most of the time. So the review should be undertaken on an annual basis. The code's not prescriptive about when that should be. Most organisations will undertake this in the autumn or towards the end of the calendar year. Each of the standards, and there are 17 of them, raises a series of questions, and the guidance and the code itself goes into quite a degree of detail around what those questions should be, what you should be asking yourself as an organisation to be able to demonstrate compliance, and that you're aware and where there are areas of weakness or risk that have been addressed. So the code has that as part of its guidance. In terms of looking at an organisation, you need to have a broad evidence base. It's no good just talking to one person or to two people. It should cover the whole organisation. So you're thinking about looking at documents, undertaking conversations on a one-to-one basis with members and with senior staff to understand where they see the organisation. The idea of using different evidence sources is that you can triangulate information, but it's just because the policy's in place, it doesn't mean that it's being delivered. So being able to have that check and balance means that as part of your evidence collection, it's as wide as possible. And at the end of the review, you'll draw conclusions, and those conclusions will necessarily identify areas that could be improved. Organisations will also recognise areas that are performing well, but there could be also opportunities to improve as well. So what we tend to see is that organisations produce a RAG-rated report, which is the report you see as part of this pack, red, amber and green, along with a commentary around each of those standards and the questions within the standards. It is healthy to see some external moderation, validation, peer review, and it can be to a greater or lesser extent. Some people actually get people in to do the review, other ones to check the process, as I've done and looked at the way you've undertaken this. Other ones it might be to sample test. And I know from an internal audit perspective, you had a review last year, which is also reported this year, doesn't it, on last year's review, which again is really healthy in terms of the way you look at it. So it's always awkward to think about there's an awful lot of regulation, and can be over-regulation, but for something like this, I think it's quite key. But from my perspective, I always think that what do you do when you've undertaken the review? So clearly it should go to an audit and governance committee on an annual basis. I'd also suggest that where there are areas of a priority, that updates against that can be reported back as well, just so you get an idea of where you are against that improvement programme. It can be included in the annual governance statement, and sometimes Section 151 officers or directors of finance will refer to the review, the outcome of the review, as part of their Section 25 statement. That's a statement that goes along with the budget in February to say that they're confident around the development of that. And interestingly as well, and I'm sure John would have a comment on this if he was still here, that because it's there, it may well fall onto an external auditor's agenda for review. So whilst it might not be part of the plan, if there's something there to look at, they'll look at that and then it'll help influence their view. So having it on a regular basis and it being done in a robust way, I think is important.
Forgive it dovetails into the audit trail.
Yeah. So why should it not be part of the audit programme that they will formally share with yourself? I think it will be as the year progresses. So my conclusions from the review that Birmingham undertook in terms of its self-assessment, it's detailed, it's thorough and it's robust, and you can see that from the papers there. I believe me, have seen lighter versions of this type of review where one person has just asked a number of questions, and so the reporting back is very detailed. What I like about it is that it's balanced, but where areas are rated as green, we're still recommending areas for improvement. So one thing Birmingham is keen on is that cycle of continuous improvement. I don't know what you look at them, it's quite funny, with the change programmes, it gets to the end of it, sits down and thinks, we're there now. But it's not, that's just the start of the next iteration. So from the way that's reported, you can see then that there's still areas, whilst it's meeting the criteria, it could do it better, it could do it stronger, it could do it in a different type of way. But I think that's a positive point. And I know that there were recommendations from the previous audit review around storage of files, around evidence, forward plans, and those have been taken account of as part of this review. And I also know from the organisation as well that areas that are within the financial management code are also being addressed and looked at through the financial change programme. So these are all integrated elements. So one doesn't rely on the other, they all work together. So it is aligned to the financial management model, and you'll be well aware of the review that's undertaken 2019, 2021, and the work that's been undertaken at the moment. So it will support that. The code is structured in a very similar way to the model, so it uses the same principles and standards. So from my perspective, then it will support future assessments. And I think it's a strong report, and I think that using the action plan that comes out of that, and the paper you put together, Sarah, shows those areas that are going to be continued or going to follow on anyway. It's positive stuff. The last few slides, I'm not going to go through those. There's some principles around good financial management. They're the ones the code's based on. and there's nothing there that will be a surprise to you. And each of those standards are say built from those. The next one then talks about the structure itself. The Institute is very good when it writes guidance, producing long guidance. The guidance for this has got 400 pages or something like that. So trying to snapshot it is important. They're the key question areas, and then underneath those, you've got a number of challenge areas. And just the third slide was, these are things to always be mindful of from wherever you are, wherever you're challenging as an officer or a member. From our perspective, these 5 key signs, you won't necessarily have all of them, some will have more than others. But when you look at those, I think it captures very well where you look at organisational financial stress and just challenge yourself about where you are on those. And that's all I was going to say.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Looking at those 5 key signals, I think I do raise at least 3 of them on a regular basis. I am the resident pain in the neck. You use discrete terminology, yes. But, you know, I think we have to be, as the audit committee, we have to be mindful of our robust reserves, the savings plan, any gaps that there are. And, yeah, I did question last week, or was it the week before? No, it was the week before, about the savings plan and overspends. And as you've heard, I have a concern about the general financial environment in which we are now working, and the ability for us to receive our due income from council taxpayers and the pressure that's going to be on them. So it's being on top of the game all the time. And I know that officers, I pay tribute to them, and I'm not from the controlling group, but the progress that they've made over the last couple of years has been very beneficial compared to where we were.
So, and from a financial management governance perspective, that's evident from the reviews I've undertaken over the last 2 years. The economic climate is really concerning, and organisations, if you look at those 5, you will see then the kind of trajectory on reserves that have been used to support day-to-day expenditure on the long term. Planning horizons are critical, and part of that is a medium and long-term financial plan. So the degree of certainty around that. What happens in a time of stress is that the medium term becomes the short term becomes very short. You think about where we were in 2020, the short term was matters of days or weeks, the medium term was months, and the long term was sort of 6 to 12 months. But the confidence around savings, delivery of savings in that period needs to remain high. It needs to remain agile, so if you can't respond on one, then you can do something else. You have a plan B to put into place. Yeah. But what tends to happen is organisations, if they're not careful, don't get to that position until it's October or November in the year, when really you need to be thinking about those April or May. That's organisations this year, we've seen that by the end of May, we're forecasting budget deficits in certain service areas was phenomenal. So how can that happen when the budget only started on the 1st of April? Within 8 weeks, it's over. So that kind of agility, the flexibility for having the knowledge to be able to move, I think is key, really.
Yeah, well, both Sarah and Mohammed will know that if you've got a £12 million savings April the 1st and you don't make it, and you haven't made it halfway through, it means you've got to save 2 million each month, and it just multiplies up. So it is being on top of your financial plan and sticking to it. And thank you for your indication of what the city is trying to do financially, Chris.
No, that's fine. Happy to help.
Lessons learned. Are we content then to note it? And we have to note 2.1, the requirements of the SIPFA Financial Management Code, 2.2, the results of the self-assessment and action to be taken, and 2.3, this is the second self-assessment, and that the self-assessment will continue to be refreshed annually and reported to elected members. Thank you. Done. Okay, thank you very much. It's now the annual government statement. Have so much fun, can't we?
Sarah Jane is going to take this.
Thank you. Yes, this is a co-produced statement between my team and Mohammed's. It sets out, it's part of the accounts, so it's audited. It sets out what our governance framework is, how we're meeting our objectives, what business plans we have in place, what decision-making structures were in place, what officer structure was in the appropriate financial year. It talks about risk management and audits and my opinion in there. The process actually starts, it's about to start. What we do every year is set a series of questions that represent what a well-managed business unit or directorate should have in place. So these questionnaires go out and each directorate nominates the appropriate level of business unit to complete it. So a directorate like City Operations has dozens because there's very little relative relationship, for instance, between bereavement services and trading standards. They're managed differently. They have got their own business plan, they've got their own risk registers on. And then these get collated up until we have at kind of an assistant director level where they pull out the significant issues that have been raised. And again at directorate level. And at directorate level, those significant issues have mitigations. And that is actually what's in your pack. At that stage, children's, I thought, did a very good job. If one of the questions that asked us, I mean, have you completed all your audit recommendations? When it came to section 11, they haven't. They raised it and never addressed it. And that's how the whole thing comes together. But so we're left with about 80 issues, and we distill them down to 7 or so that are at the back. Looking for either really big issues or commonality of issues. And we had a similar risk last year, and in the statement we reflect how this has been monitored, and whether there's been scrutiny reports or cabinet actions and so on. So this is a very important document. It may not be the final document because it has to cover the period up to the signing of the accounts. So when the final accounts come here, there may be some tweaks and differences which I can flag for you.
Chair, if I may, as the monitoring officer, I would also like some time, short period of time before the signing of the accounts, just to peruse the annual governance statement. So obviously as a monitoring officer, I've got a critical role in the contribution of it. Can't possibly comment at week 2.5.
Yeah.
But closer to the sign off of the accounts, obviously, I would just like an opportunity, already started conversations with Sarah. Do need to speak to Sarah and some of my colleagues, like Becky, Deborah as well. So with your indulgence, Chair, I would also like to contribute towards the completion of the annual governance statement for the next iteration, which we included in the statement.
Chair, the annual government statement has been reviewed by the external auditors, so it will be then brought back again with any changes that the auditors disagree with or do agree with. Yes. So there will be an opportunity, so there is opportunity for this to be amended before it is formally agreed.
So you've got the opportunity.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
There's also opportunity for members during this window of external scrutiny to review this and get back to myself or Sarah.
Okay.
Are we happy with that then? Can we approve the annual governance statement that will be included in the 2021-22 statement of accounts, and to agree the arrangements for the management of the item included in section 6 will be reported to the audit committee during the year. Agreed? Noted. Thank you. Right. Statement of accounts.
So Mohammed's going to take the report. I'm just going to give a quick brief on it. So we have a statutory responsibility to produce a statement of accounts each year and that to be audited. There are detailed rules and regulations and timetables that the council needs to follow. They are in the report, so there's plenty of details on that. The council, i.e. its members, are also required to approve the audited accounts, and at Birmingham this function of approval is undertaken by this audit committee. Mohammed's presentation today will give a brief highlight and pointers to help committee members navigate our very lengthy statement of accounts. So hand over to Mohammed.
I assume that you've read the report, but that's mainly for information in terms of what the process, what the relevant regulations are that we need to follow, what the processes are, and what happens once the audit takes place. But the document is 220 pages long, so I'm conscious that members will accountants struggle to work through that document. So that is one of the things that, you know, as an institute and as professionals we are looking into. What I want to do today is offer a short highlight of what the key issues are that the audit committee needs to focus on. And then what I am offering is, we did last year, and was took us up on this, is an evening briefing for members to attend, where I will go through a much longer slide presentation. And there is still, even after that, one-to-ones, if you want to contact me or want to go through something specific on the account, we can do that. The external audit is at the moment being carried out by Nicola and her team. And then once they've reported that, they'll report back to this committee. And then this committee will be asked to approve the audited accounts when that time arises. So you can't see the top of my screen at the moment, but this is telling, thought we'd start by undertaking what is the role of the audit committee with regards to financial statements, because I think that's very important for committee members, especially the new committee, to understand. And this is based on this forthcoming publication, Audit Committees, the Practical Guidance for Local Authorities. And the first is to monitor the arrangements and preparations for financial reporting so that we can meet deadlines and timescales. So for the previous year, that's now passed. But we do bring reports throughout the year explaining how we are doing that. Part of that is to make sure, and Grant Thornton recently issued a report on where accountants have got into financial difficulties, is that this lack of quality staff or informed staff who can produce financial statements and interpret financial activities into what do they mean in terms of the budget, what do they mean in terms of funding, what do they mean in terms of the accounts, and especially if there's complex financial arrangements. You have leases with PFI and other ways of funding and doing things. The second is to review the annual statement of accounts, which is hopefully what we are doing tonight and over the next few months. Specifically to review whether the appropriate accounting policies have been followed and whether we've acted upon them. And this is a discussion we have many times at these committees and a scrutiny, where the difference between the role of audit committee, which is about governance, and scrutiny, which is maybe about performance. For example, the accounts will say that we've spent £5 million on social services, just a random number, just a bit more than that. But so the role of this committee is not to ask why did we spend 5 million, is to ask, was it really 5 million? Have we accounted for it properly? Was it not 4 million? Was it not 6 million? Why is it 5 million? And then that's because we follow the accounting policies and to make sure that the relevant costs are in the right year. Why we spent 5 million, that's a discussion for scrutiny or performance of the cabinet, a different forum. Here is to make sure that the accounts that we are presenting are valid. And similarly, the auditors, they will be making sure that the numbers are correct to a material level. And in their VFM assessment, they'll talk about whether it was valid for money, whether we should have done that. But for the statement of accounts, are the numbers right? So that the basis stuff like that. We brought our accounting policies to this committee, and we do so every year in March. And we had a discussion then, so that and they're approved on an annual basis. Then the final thing for this committee will be to consider the external auditor's report. So once they've concluded or as part of their work, they bring progress report or in the final report here and with their findings and what they found with the accounts. And then it'd be for yourselves to question that and to gain appropriate assurances on how valid the statements are, and then based upon what their findings are and our representation, for you to approve the statement of accounts or not. So just about the process, we have shared, or they're on the website now. This presentation was written in July before so it's slightly outdated and most of the meeting was postponed. So we share the accounts with that. This is a short accompanying briefing to help you navigate some of the key messages. A briefing is being offered for members, and hopefully a day Monday we'll be able to arrange a date with yourself, either in the evening via Teams or however you see fit. And then we can have a discussion at future audit committee in more detail if required, or one-to-one basis as you wish. The unaudited accounts were issued by the responsible financial officers the term used in the statute, which is Becky Hellard here as our 151 officer. So she issued those on the 31st of July, which was in accordance with the timetable. So we met that first timetable. The public inspection and the audit started immediately. The public inspection period has now ended on 12th September. We're expecting the audit of the numbers to be completed by the end of November. And hopefully by then, if the national issues resolved by then, we should be able to hopefully ask audit committee at a subsequent meeting to approve the accounts. And the audit plan was received in June. Key areas for your attention are, and going back to the point about understanding how we produce the statement of accounts, is that the accounts include a range of estimates and uncertainty, and that's normal because we are dealing with large numbers. For example, when we're talking about accruals, we've got large valuations of our pension fund deficit or liabilities, of our pension fund assets. We've got large valuations of our provisions, large valuations of our property assets. So they're based on a range of that, and we've given that in note 4 to the accounts. We have a large pension fund deficit, which I'll put a slide on, and that has a massive influence on our balance sheet. And there's ways of accounting for that. And the liability is driven by the actual area assumption. So we'll hopefully show you how volatile that can be, especially the markets have been at this stage. That can have a massive difference. So, and the thing about the pension fund liability is that we don't believe we'll ever crystallise in one go unless we stop trading or we cease to exist. It just says that how much we would need, how much at this point in time we would have to pay. So we don't need to make all that money up in one go. It gives the indication. So because as long as we can make the payments to the pension fund each year, that meets the requirement. PPE balance, we've got 60,000 properties, and a significant amount of those need to be valued. And hopefully on the evening, I'll be able to give more information how we value assets, and there's different ways of valuing different types of assets, what they mean. The comprehensive income and expenditure statement, which in normal language would mean the profit and loss account of what we spend on a day-to-day basis, how much money we get in. That shows that we had net expenditure of £1.4 billion. And then we've got, and now shows net expenditure 1.4 billion, which means we have about 1.3 million of that is to do with property, plant and equipment valuations and the pension fund adjustments and liability. So we then have, we produce a statement of accounts on international accounting standards. So there was a drive about 15 years ago to try to make them comparable across the world. However, we then have legislation which says that, for example, depreciation on assets or gains in the value of assets shouldn't fall on the bottom line, so that we don't charge council taxpayers that money. So they don't get the benefit, they don't get because that's not what we're in the business for, it's property valuation. So those things are then excluded from our accounts. So which is the other point that, so we made a funding surplus of 65.3 million. So in terms of real money, our usable reserves or cash in the bank increased by £65.3 million last year. So you can see how we got from 1.4 billion to 63 million, 65 million, but the big numbers I'll have on a different sheet. The movement in reserve statement, this shows actually what our reserves are. Our reserves, as I just highlighted, are made up of usable reserves. That's real money that we can use. And that was £1.5 billion. That is real spending power that we can have. We also have a negative reserve of 1.024 million, and those negative reserves are historic depreciation, historic changes in valuation of assets, and also our pension fund deficit liability. So if you're on the balance sheet for the liability, then that needs to be matched up by something in the reserves below the line to make the balance sheet balance, which is why you have that element in there as well. So although we last year we had a net deficit of 394, we now have a surplus of £1 billion on our balance sheet. Keynotes to the accounts. That's not me, that's probably that mission, isn't it? Hopefully. Key notes that members might be interested in are notes 2 and 4, which talk about critical judgments and estimation processes, which is something the auditors really focus on, key numbers. Note 19 and 20 are the pension schemes. Note 30 and 31 are the provisions and potential liabilities. So provisions are money we've set aside for known events that happened in the past that could lead to a financial consequence for us. Because they're more likely than not to happen on the balance probability, we need to set money aside, and the auditors will look at that. Notes 42, 43, 44 in that order are member allowances, officer remuneration, and exit packages, which don't form part of the accounts themselves, but they're information that we are required to present for transparency reasons. We, Birmingham City Council, is a single entity, but then we also have associated subsidiaries such as Civico, Birmingham Airport, that is one of our associates, so we need to produce group accounts as well. So you'll see that we'll have 2 sets of balance sheets, 2 sets of INE, one for the single entity as a council and one as a group entity. Going concern is something that we need to convince our auditors that we are a going concern entity, or else everything on the balance sheet will have to crystallise because we were going to be shut down. And then obviously the pension fund deficit will become a big issue for us because we'd have to find that money before. But we have to then do something and prove to the auditors that we are a going concern. And firstly, obviously, legally, we can't be closed down unless this is a law passed by Parliament. But also from a financial point of view, we've got reserves, we've got a budget book, we've got a budget plan for 3 years. So the going concern is only for 12 months horizon, but we can evidence that we should be around for more than 12 months financially. And that's the basis of all accounts in the public or private sector. Just wanted to highlight to you some of the complexities with the accounts. Our balance sheet basically shows what we own or what we're worth. So our net worth increased by 1.4 billion last year in the accounts. But that's because you can see the reasons for that. And a lot of those, our pension liability reduced by £500 million. I'll come on to that later on. And our property values increased by 776 million. The context of that is that the previous valuation was on the 31st of March 2020. As soon as we went into the COVID pandemic, then valuations of everything really slumped. And then as the economy improved, these valuations are based on the 31st of March. So these have then increased since then. So there was a significant drop in, if you went back to last year's equivalent accounts, there was a drop to this is equivalent. And similarly the same with the pensions liability as well, there was an uptake. So but out of that 1.4 billion, in terms of real money for us, it was only £65 million of true surplus that we were, and most of that was put into our reserves. Our unusable reserves, which is the other side of those pension liabilities and the property valuations, they went up by £1.3 million. So although the balance sheet might say we've got up by 1.4 billion, the real number that of consequence for us into the real money and spending power is just 65 million. So you can see the largest item on our balance sheet is our property assets of £7 billion. Just under 3 billion is council dwellings, which are our council houses and flats that we use for social housing. That valuation is the market value of those properties, but only 40% of that market value. So the regulations for how we value council housing is that because they effectively have a sitting tenant in, and we can only charge social rents. So we take the market value that if this was in the open market, and this adjusted down, that valuation is given to us, that percentage is given to us by as a guide by the government department, and that varies across the country. In London, it's only 25%, which shows a difference between private rents and public rents. But in Birmingham, for the West Midlands, it's 40%. Our other land and buildings are worth 2.4 billion. Those are our schools, our offices, our community centres, and there's a variety of ways that those are valued. Some are valued on what value they give us into the existing use. Some are valued that if we have to rebuild it today, how much will it cost? So depending on the type of asset it is. Infrastructure are our roads and bridges and highways that we are responsible for. And that basically shows how much we've spent in the past on those assets and then depreciated over a number of years. As you can see, that's £500 million, and that's why the the auditors can't sign that off because of an issue that's been raised for how these are valued. So they're not, about 10 years ago, there was a move to have a value to go out and value this. And that would have cost a lot of money, as in what is the current value of these assets. So that was scrapped, and so we just have historic values. And the challenge is, these historic values of these assets appropriate under the international accounting standards? It probably isn't, which is why we need a statutory override to that to dispense with that, because the way the statute is written at the moment and the way the auditors have to audit us is that you are following standards. There's a doubt whether we are on this particular asset or not. Assets under construction are assets that we are constructing or building, allowing it reach completion. Once they're complete, they move to the other categories it's going to use. So our property, plant and equipment moved by 776 million, and the reason for that was an upward revaluation of 562 million. We spent 467 million pounds on our assets, so we do spend just over half a million pounds on our assets as part of our capital programme each year. Depreciation of 147 million, and we disposed and moved for help us out of 142 million pounds. This is the last slide, but it's about the pension liability that it's dropped by 538 million pounds. So the pension is made up of two parts, but the assets and the liabilities. So all the contributions that we make into the pension fund, employers make, the pension fund is responsible now to try and translate that into an income stream for the future over a number of years. So it invests in various assets, and we can see that in the accounts. So the asset values in the last 12 months of these accounts went up by 300 million pounds. And then interest on that also went up by 100 million pounds, because obviously the rates of interest are going up, so future interest on that, and those balances and those assets will go up as well. We paid out 210 million pounds in benefits, so that brings the asset down, but it reduces the liability on the side, as you see there. So in liabilities, I went down by 294 million, and that's because we had 452 million pound actuarial change, and we had 354 million pound benefits earned. So obviously, the earning of benefits isn't what's paid out, but it's for every year that you've earned. You've never accrued a certain amount of benefits that you will then get paid out X amount of years after you've retired. So there's an actual assumption for that. The benefits are paid at 210 million. Just to give you an indication of why the actuarial changes have taken place, why it's a positive one on us, is that might be depressing or might not be, but in 2021 they assumed that current pensioners would live 21.6 years after retiring, after 65. They've revised that down to 21.2. Don't know why, but it's and same for women. Women have only dropped by 3 months, whereas men have dropped by 4 months. But for people who are still working, they expect them to live longer after 65. So although it's come down, but they're expected to live 22.9 and women for 25.4. So they use that assumption to figure out how long they like to keep paying us, which is why the benefits earned goes up essentially. Inflation obviously has gone up as well as indication, as we all know. They then assume salaries will also go up, and because pensions are linked to your salaries, that has a negative impact. That goes up, so they expect that to go up. So obviously then they expect the pensions to go up as well. And the rate of discounting scheme liabilities, again with inflation, we've used a higher rate of discounting that down, which is why we've got the interest benefit. So we've got the pound value today is much more, it's worth more than a pound next year will be. So unfortunately, if you accrue benefits, you accrue those kind of statically in the future. Unless you become a pensioner there or defer it, then you start accruing CPI on your pension benefit. So that's kind of the last slide. And so I've just given you highlight the kind of complexities within the accounts, and these are two key numbers. Not going to even go through some of the smaller numbers and what they mean as well. So that's the slide. That's the presentation share.
Thank you, Mohammed. It's heartwarming to note that the actuaries are playing a positive role at our expense. Any questions to Mohammed?
I'm not leaving that.
No, right. Members are recommended to 2.1 note the legislative requirements and proposed review, publication and approval timetable of both the draft and audited statement of accounts, and 2.2 note the proposed briefings offered to the committee. Is that noted?
Yeah.
Thank you. Nearly there. Schedule of outstanding minutes. Um, 377, that can be discharged. 412, external auditors' findings can be discharged. Very good.
Sorry, was there a trial and how is just going to provide an update on that?
Yeah, this came to our audit committee as part of the audit findings draft report from the auditors, where they expressed concern that they didn't have enough information to conclude the valuation of certain housing assets. But that's been subsequently cleared that if Nicola's still on the line, that they now are happy now with the information provided and can gain assurance over those particular housing assets that were valued in a discounted cash flow.
Yes, it can be now. Okay, thank you. And 412, verbal update from the manager. Yeah, that's that can be discharged. 413, letter from council. Yes, we've had chief executive today. That can be discharged. Risk management update regarding safeguarding. Sarah, that can be discharged. Adoption of accounting policies 2021.
That's something I'll provide on the evening of the briefing. If there was a question about, I'll give a small brief of how assets are valued and different ways. So we can go into more detail if required at that briefing. If it's not required,
okay, well, I'm sure we're looking forward to that now. Um, 443, Auditor's Annual Report. Members have requested that a future training session should be provided in relation to members' interests. I thought that Satinder had carried that out on a one-to-one basis. So that can be discharged. Okay. 444, telephone number for highway, as I recall, going back. Auditor's annual report, we received that, so that can be discharged. Audit committee, 3 additional recommendation to independent advisor to hold private session. That has been done and discharged. And officers to provide update to members around queries on fraud recovery. That was really circulated, so that can be discharged. So that's completed that. Any other urgent business? None has been given to me. Authority to chairman and officers in an urgent situation between meetings. Chairman jointly with relevant officer has authority to act on behalf of the committee. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you very much. And the date of the next meeting is 18th of October 2022. That's 1400 hours. And could I thank colleagues who stood it to the end. A marathon session, and the meeting closes at 17:03.